There are 10,000 ways to die in the Imperium of man, but only one way to wake up, not knowing if you're the hero or the monster. Frank Castle discovered this the hard way when he opened his eyes to find a bolt pistol in his hand and blood that wasn't his own soaking through a Commissar's greatcoat he didn't remember putting on. The room spun. Wrong light, wrong air, wrong gravity, pulling at bones that felt heavier than they should. Frank's hand, his hand, but not quite, lifted the pistol. Standard issue, Godwin pattern bolt pistol, his mind supplied with confidence that terrified him. How did he know that? The weapon felt natural in his grip, broken in by countless hours of use he couldn't recall. His other hand found the desk beside the cot. Parchment crinkled under his palm. Execution reports, hundreds of them. Each one stamped with a signature he recognized as his own, but had never written. Commissar F. Castle, 501st Cadian Regiment, 2,000 confirmed kills. Not enemy combatants, Imperial Guardsmen, his own troops. Frank's stomach turned as he read the charges. Cowardice, desertion, insubordination, defeatist speech. Each report clinical, professional, justified according to commissarial doctrine his brain seemed to know intimately. Private Hendrick, executed for falling asleep on watch after 43 hours of continuous combat. Corporal Vane, executed for requesting medical evacuation of wounded instead of maintaining firing line. Sergeant Colner, executed for unauthorized tactical withdrawal from untenable position. Children, most of them, kids who'd made the mistake of showing fear in a galaxy that punished weakness with death. And Frank had killed them all. He stumbled to the mirror, bolted above the wash basin. The face staring back wore scars in the wrong places. A lash burn across the jaw he'd never taken. Augmetic implants in his left temple pulsing with soft blue light. His skull had been opened, his brain touched by hands that rewrote 6 months of his life into military execution and absolute authority. The Imperium had found Frank Castle, somehow, impossibly, and decided the Punisher would make an excellent instrument of terror. They'd been right. Frank's hands shook as he gripped the basin. Somewhere in the fortress monastery around him, soldiers moved through their routines. Morning prayers to the God Emperor, weapons maintenance, the casual preparation for another day of dying for mankind's cruel necessity, and every single one of them feared the man in this room, the Commissar who'd built his reputation on ruthless enforcement of Imperial law. A data slate on the desk chimed. New orders. Frank picked it up, his fingers moving with practiced efficiency to access the encrypted file. He read it once, twice. His jaw clenched hard enough to make his teeth ache. Commissar Throne from the neighboring 408th Regiment was requesting his presence for a joint execution. A soldier had hesitated during yesterday's orc attack, 10 seconds of frozen terror before training kicked in and he'd fought like a lion. 10 seconds that, according to Throne's report, constituted cowardice requiring public execution. The soldier was 19 years old, first combat deployment, 3 confirmed orc kills after he'd recovered from his momentary freeze. Frank looked at the bolt pistol in his hand, then at the execution reports, then at the face in the mirror wearing scars from a war he couldn't remember fighting. They gave me a badge, he said to his reflection. They gave me a gun. They told me to kill the guilty. For the first time in his lives apparently, Frank Castle wasn't sure if he was the punishment or the crime. If you're hungry for more tales from the grim darkness where justice drowns in bureaucracy and heroes become monsters, hit that subscribe button. The Emperor protects the faithful, but I'll protect you from boring content. Trust me, what comes next gets worse before it gets better, and Frank's about to discover just how deep the Imperium's corruption runs when your job is to enforce it. Frank Castle holstered the bolt pistol, straightened the Commissar's coat he still didn't remember earning, and walked out to meet Throne. He had questions that needed answering. He had 6 months of missing memories to recover, and he had a sinking feeling that before this day ended, He'd be adding another name to his execution list, just not the one anyone expected. The courtyard of Firebase Kratos Prime stank of promethium and fear. Frank crossed the parade ground with the gait of a man who'd walked toward violence so many times it had become muscle memory, which apparently it had, even if his conscious mind couldn't recall the rehearsals. 200 soldiers from the 501st and 408th stood at rigid attention, their faces carefully blank. They'd seen this ritual before, public execution as breakfast entertainment, another day in the Emperor's endless war. Commissar Throne waited beside the post, one hand resting on his bolt pistol with theatrical casualness. He was older than Frank, face weathered by decades of enforcing Imperial law across a dozen war zones. His greatcoat bore commendations Frank's stolen knowledge identified automatically: pacification of Vordrak 7, the cleansing of Hive Tertius, the Kargoth rebellion suppression, each one a campaign where summary execution had been policy, not exception. The condemned soldier knelt at the post, hands bound behind his back. Private Marcus Delvain. Frank's augmented memory supplied the details unbidden. Assigned to heavy weapons squad, parents dead in tyrannid invasion of his homeworld, younger sister in Scholar Progenium orphanage, waiting for his letters. The kid's face was streaked with tears and mucus, his breathing ragged with the kind of panic that came from knowing exactly how the next 5 minutes would end. Commissar Castle. Throne's voice carried across the courtyard with practiced authority. Thank you for attending. I thought it appropriate that we make this example together, a united front between regiments. Cowardice is contagion. It spreads through units like plague unless we excise it immediately. Frank stopped 3 paces from the post, close enough to see the kid's pupils dilated with terror, close enough to smell the urine soaking through his fatigues. What exactly did he do? Throne's eyebrow raised a fraction. My report was quite clear. During yesterday's Orc assault on Trench Line Epsilon, Private Delvain froze for approximately 10 seconds before resuming combat operations. 10 seconds of paralysis while his squadmates fought and died around him. And after those 10 seconds, what happens after is irrelevant. The hesitation itself, answer the question. Frank's voice dropped to the register he'd used on criminals who thought they could lawyer their way out of consequences. What did he do after he unfroze? Throne's jaw tightened. Around them, 200 soldiers held their breath. Commissars didn't question each other. They presented unified authority, absolute and unchallenged. He resumed firing, killed 3 orcs in close combat, retrieved wounded comrade from no man's land under heavy fire. So he fought. After demonstrating cowardice, the moment of weakness is what matters, Castle. We cannot tolerate. He's 19. Frank stepped closer to the kid, studying him the way he'd studied countless targets on another world in another life. The soldier was shaking, but his eyes held something besides fear now. Confusion. Hope, maybe, that this strange new commissar asking questions might be different. Frank crushed that hope before it could take root. Hope got people killed. First deployment? Yes, sir. Delvain's voice cracked. Deployed 6 weeks ago. Yesterday was my first combat against actual... Did I ask you to speak? Frank's hand moved to his bolt pistol. The kid's mouth snapped shut. Throne. 6 weeks deployed. First real combat. 10 seconds of freeze followed by exemplary performance under fire. And your solution is execution? The law is clear. Throne's hand tightened on his own pistol. Commissarial doctrine states that any display of cowardice in the face of the enemy is punishable by summary execution at commissar discretion. I know the law. Frank drew his bolt pistol in one smooth motion. The courtyard tensed. Throne smiled, thinking this was agreement. Thing is, I've spent my whole life enforcing laws, hunting people who broke them. And you know what I learned? Frank raised the pistol, not at the kid, at Throne. Sometimes the law is wrong, and sometimes the people enforcing it are worse than the criminals they're hunting. Throne's smile vanished. Castle, what are you? You've executed 47 men in the last 3 months. I read your reports. Kid who fell asleep after 2 days straight of watch duty. Medic who used supplies on wounded instead of hoarding them. Squad leader who pulled his men back from a position that got overrun 5 minutes after they evacuated. Frank's finger found the trigger. You're not maintaining discipline. You're just a bully with a badge who gets off on having power over people who can't fight back. You're insane. Throne drew his pistol, but Frank was faster. He'd always been faster. Guards, arrest this! The bolt round took Throne between the eyes. His head snapped back in a spray of red mist and bone fragments, the explosive shell doing what it was designed to do to unarmored targets. The body dropped like a puppet with cut strings, greatcoat settling over the corpse like a shroud. Silence crashed over the courtyard. 200 soldiers stared. Commissar Throne's bodyguards had their lasguns raised but hadn't fired, couldn't process what they'd just witnessed. One commissar executing another was heresy against imperial authority itself. Frank didn't holster his pistol. He kept it out, sweeping the crowd, daring anyone to make the next move. Anyone else got a problem? The bodyguards looked at each other, at Throne's corpse, at Frank's face, which promised more of the same if they pushed it. Slowly, they lowered their weapons. Frank turned to the kid still kneeling at the post, cut his bonds with the combat knife from his boot. Next time you freeze, you die. Not from my gun, from the enemy's while you're standing there with your thumb up your ass. Understand? Yes, sir. Delvane scrambled to his feet, rubbing circulation back into his wrists. Get back to your unit. Frank watched the kid run, then addressed the assembled soldiers. His soldiers now, apparently. New rule. I don't execute people for being scared. I execute them for being traitors, cowards who abandon their brothers, or criminals who prey on the weak. You do your job. You follow legitimate orders. You watch your squad mates back. We won't have problems. You rape, you steal, you run when your brothers need you. You collaborate with the enemy. He nudged Throne's corpse with his boot. You end up like this. Clear? Murmurs of assent rippled through the formation. Not enthusiastic. They were too shocked for enthusiasm, but genuine. Maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't have to die for freezing under fire or asking the wrong questions. Dismissed, and someone clean this up. Frank holstered his pistol and walked back toward the command bunker, his mind racing. He'd just executed a commissar in front of 200 witnesses. The Inquisition would hear about this within hours. They'd come for him with stormtroopers and interrogators and mind probes that would tear apart whatever was left of Frank Castle's identity. Good, let them come. He had questions about 6 missing months, about why they'd stolen his memories and turned him into their attack dog. And Frank Castle had always been really good at getting answers from people who didn't want to talk. Behind him, soldiers broke formation and scattered, voices rising in hushed excitement and terror. They'd just watched their new commissar commit career suicide, or maybe, just maybe, start a revolution. Frank didn't look back. He had work to do, starting with finding out who'd mind-wiped him, why they'd brought him to this nightmare galaxy, and how many other commissars needed killing before he could call his debt paid. The courtyard of Firebase Kratos Prime would smell like promethium and fear for hours yet, but now it also smelled like something the Imperium had forgotten: justice. The command bunker's archive room hadn't seen proper maintenance in years. Dust coated the data slates stacked on shelves that reached the rockcrete ceiling, and the lumens flickered with the irregular rhythm of failing power conduits. Frank didn't care about the ambience. He cared about the locked cabinet in the corner marked with the inquisitorial seal, 3 bars and a stylized I that meant authorized personnel only, violation punishable by death. He shot the lock off. The bolt round made obscene noise in the confined space, and the cabinet door swung open to reveal what Frank had suspected he'd find: personal files on every Commissar assigned to the Kratos Prime sector, including his own. He grabbed the data slate marked Castle F Commissar Eyes Only and thumbed it active. The screen glowed sickly green in the dim light. Frank's jaw clenched as he scrolled through the file's introduction. Subject retrieved from non-Imperial space-time anomaly. Warp phenomenon classified as Epsilon 7 incursion. Subject exhibited extreme resistance to interrogation, enhanced combat capability, and psychological profile consistent with sanctioned Imperial execution doctrine. Recommended for Commissariat integration following standard memory restructuring protocols. Memory restructuring. They had a clinical term for it, like they were reformatting a cogitator instead of lobotomizing a human being's identity. Frank kept reading. The file documented his integration with surgical precision. Day 1. Subject responds poorly to commissarial indoctrination. Maintains pre-integration ethical framework incompatible with Imperial doctrine. Recommendation: enhanced memory suppression. Day 7. Subject successfully executed first Imperial Guardsman for cowardice. No hesitation observed. Integration proceeding as planned. Day 42. Subject has achieved full commissarial efficiency. Kill rate exceeds expectations. Memory blocks holding stable. His hands shook, not from fear, from rage so pure it felt like swallowing molten metal. They'd found Frank Castle, somehow pulled him through whatever nightmare the warp was, looked at his history of killing criminals, and decided he'd be perfect for their murder machine. They just had to erase the part of him that cared about guilt or innocence first. The next section made it worse. Video logs. Timestamp: 187 days prior. Frank's finger hovered over the playback button. Part of him didn't want to see. Didn't want confirmation that he'd spent 6 months being exactly what he'd always hunted. An authority figure who killed the innocent because the system said it was legal. He pressed play anyway. The screen showed a muddy trench somewhere cold and miserable. Rain hammered down on soldiers huddled against sandbags, their faces grey with exhaustion and hypothermia. A figure in a commissar's coat walked through the trench with the purposeful stride of an executioner approaching the gallows. Frank recognized his own gait even before the figure turned toward the camera. His face, his body, but the eyes were wrong, empty. The eyes of a man following programming instead of conscience. Medike Kolov, his recorded voice said, flat and professional. You stand accused of wasting Imperial medical resources on wounded who cannot return to combat effectiveness. 17 soldiers received treatment for injuries that should have resulted in immediate termination and resource reclamation. How do you plead? The Medike was young, couldn't have been more than 25. She looked at the Commissar, at Frank, with the expression of someone already dead. They were my patients. I took an oath. Your oath is to the Emperor, not to soldiers who can no longer serve his armies. The Frank on screen drew his bolt pistol with mechanical efficiency. Your actions demonstrate prioritization of individual life over Imperial resource management. The penalty is death. Please. The Medike's voice cracked. They had families. They had... The bolt pistol fired. The Medike's head exploded across the trench wall. Soldiers nearby flinched but didn't move, didn't protest, didn't do anything but stare at their boots while their healer's corpse slumped into the mud. The Frank on screen holstered his weapon. Let this be a lesson. The Emperor requires efficiency. Sentimentality is treason. He walked away without looking back at what he'd done. The video ended. Frank stood motionless in the archive room, the data slate trembling in his grip. That woman had been doing her job, helping people, and he'd killed her for it because some inquisitor had scrambled his brain and told him mercy was weakness. He forced himself to open the next video. Timestamp: 134 days prior. A forward observation post. A Vox operator, barely 18, desperately transmitting coordinates. Repeat: civilian evacuation convoy under attack at grid reference. "Cease transmission." The recorded Frank's voice commanded. "Sir, there are children in those transports. Civilian assets are not priority. You will maintain combat communication protocols only." "But sir," the bolt pistol rose. The girl saw it coming, had time to understand, had time for her face to collapse into disbelief that this was how she'd die, not from enemy action, not even in combat, just for trying to save children. Spreading defeatist communications and prioritizing non-combatants over military objectives. Summary execution authorized. Blam. Frank closed the video, opened another, and another, each one worse than the last. A squadron leader executed for unauthorized retreat from a position that got overrun 3 minutes after he pulled his men out. A tactical withdrawal that saved 40 lives, but violated the standing order to hold at all costs. A logistics officer executed for hoarding supplies when he'd been maintaining proper inventory instead of immediately distributing everything. A chaplain executed for undermining morale because he'd offered soldiers spiritual comfort instead of telling them to die gladly. 2,000 names, 2,000 execution reports. And here, in this archive, were the video records of at least 50 of them. 50 good people doing their jobs, trying to survive, trying to help others survive. And Frank had killed them all because someone had turned him into a weapon and pointed him at the wrong targets. His vision blurred. Frank Castle didn't cry, hadn't cried since Maria and the kids died in Central Park a lifetime ago. But his eyes burned now, staring at the data slate showing the frozen frame of a Medicay's exploded skull. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the screen, to Koloff and the Vox operator and the squadron leader and all the others whose names he'd need to memorize. "I'm so goddamn sorry." Sorry wouldn't bring them back. Sorry wouldn't absolve him. But Frank had spent years on Earth making criminals pay for their crimes. He'd believed in punishment, in consequences, in the idea that bad people deserved what they got. Well, he'd just discovered he was one of the bad people. The data slate's directory showed 1,147 more video files. Frank started downloading them all to a portable storage device. He'd watch every single one, learn every name, see every face. Not as penance. Penance was for people who wanted forgiveness, and Frank didn't deserve that. No, he'd watch them because he needed to know exactly what he'd done, and then he'd figure out how to pay for it. The door to the archive room hissed open behind him. Frank's hand found his bolt pistol before his brain registered the sound, muscle memory from his old life and his stolen months working in perfect synchronization. He turned, weapon raised, to find a young corporal standing in the doorway with his hands raised and eyes wide. "Sir, Commissar Castle, sir. I was just..." The kid swallowed hard. "Captain Brennis sent me. Says you need to see what's happening in the East Barracks. Says it's urgent." Frank lowered the pistol fractionally. "What's happening?" "It's Commissar Vrenk from the 83rd, sir. He's executing soldiers for yesterday's performance in the Orc raids. He's already killed 4. Says he's got 12 more on the list." Frank's finger tightened on the trigger of his holstered weapon. The rage that had been building while watching his own atrocities found a new target. Not himself, not yet. First, he had other commissars to deal with. "Tell Captain Brennis I'm on my way." Frank ejected the data slate, pocketed it. "And Corporal, what's your name?" "Hendricks, sir. Corporal Marcus Hendricks." "Hendricks, the man I killed this morning, Commissar Throne. How many soldiers did he execute last month?" Hendricks hesitated, clearly weighing the danger of answering honestly against the danger of lying to the commissar who'd just shot another commissar in the face. 27, sir. That we know of. Probably more that weren't officially recorded." 27. And Throne had been operating for years. Frank did the math and felt his stomach turn. Thousands of soldiers killed not by the enemy, but by the system meant to lead them. "Go," Frank said quietly. "Tell Brennis I'll handle Vrenk personally." Hendricks saluted and disappeared, Frank stood alone in the archive room, surrounded by evidence of his own crimes and the crimes of dozens of other commissars who'd been given absolute authority and zero accountability. He'd been the Punisher on Earth, hunted murderers, mobsters, rapists, anyone who preyed on the innocent. Then they dragged him to this nightmare galaxy, erased his memories and turned him into everything he'd sworn to destroy. But Frank Castle was awake now, and he remembered who he used to be. Time to remind the Imperium what happens when you give a weapon a conscience and then try to take it away. Commissar Vrenk had 12 more soldiers on his execution list. Frank had just added Vrenk's name to his own. The East Barracks was a converted cargo hauler bay, all exposed girders and corrugated metal walls that amplified every sound into echoing cathedral acoustics. Perfect for making sure everyone heard the bolt pistols bark when a commissar decided someone needed killing. Frank approached with the deliberate pace of a man who'd already decided how this ended. He just needed to let it play out long enough to make the point stick. Commissar Vrenk stood in the center of the bay, surrounded by the 83rd Regiment's 4th Company. 200 soldiers formed a hollow square, forced to watch their brothers die as an educational experience. 4 bodies already lay in spreading pools of blood, their execution having been recent enough that the metallic stench hadn't been overwhelmed by the bay's usual smell of recaf, low sticks, and despair. Vrenk was older than Throne had been, perhaps 60 standard years, with the kind of face that had forgotten how to smile sometime during the previous century. His commissar's coat was immaculate despite the blood spatter, and his bolt pistol gleamed with the loving maintenance of a man who considered it an extension of his own judgment. 8 soldiers knelt in a line before him, hands bound, faces locked in that peculiar expression of people who'd already accepted death, but couldn't quite stop hoping for a miracle. And let this be a lesson to any man who thinks acceptable performance is enough. Vrenk's voice boomed across the bay. The Emperor does not reward adequacy. He demands excellence. Private Markov here killed only 3 orcs during yesterday's engagement. 3, while his squadmates killed 5, 6, even 7. His mediocrity endangered the entire line. Private Markov looked maybe 20 years old, though the premature aging that came from combat stress made it hard to tell. He stared at the floor, shoulders shaking. I tried my best, sir. The orcs came so fast. Your best was inadequate. Vrenk raised his bolt pistol. The penalty for inadequacy in the face of the enemy is death. Frank's voice cut through Vrenk's speech like a knife through wet parchment. That's always your answer, isn't it? The entire bay turned. Vrenk's head swiveled toward Frank with the mechanical precision of an automated gun turret acquiring a target. His eyes narrowed, calculating, recognizing a fellow commissar but clearly uncertain about Frank's intentions. Commissar Castle, I heard about your incident with Throne this morning. Vrenk's tone carried enough contempt to corrode armor plating. Come to watch proper discipline being administered, or are you here to execute me for doing my duty? Frank walked into the hollow square, his boots loud on the metal flooring. The soldiers tracked him with their eyes, but didn't move, couldn't move, trained by years of imperial indoctrination to stand and witness no matter what atrocity unfolded before them. Tell me about your duty. You've executed 47 men in 3 months. Throne did the same. That's 94 dead Imperial soldiers who never got killed by the enemy, just by the people supposedly leading them. Discipline is... I read your reports. Frank stopped 10 paces from Vrenk, close enough for conversation, far enough to draw if this went the way he expected. Soldier executed for falling asleep after 40 hours straight of watch duty. Another executed for crying during artillery barrage. A third executed for asking when reinforcements would arrive. You're not maintaining discipline, Vrenk. You're just scared. Vrenk's face flushed red. How dare you? You're scared that if you don't kill enough of your own men, someone will think you're weak. You're scared that the system you've served your whole life might not need you. So you invent reasons to execute people, rack up your body count, prove you're still useful. Frank's hand drifted toward his holster. You're a bully who found a uniform that makes bullying legal. I am an instrument of the Emperor's will. Vrenk's pistol swung toward Frank now, away from the kneeling soldiers. Good. That was progress. I have served for 43 years. I have maintained order across 17 campaigns. I have executed traitors, cowards, and heretics by the hundreds. Who are you to question my service? Someone who spent most of his life killing people like you. Frank drew. Vrenk was fast for a man his age, trained by decades of summary executions, but Frank had been killing since before this old bastard learned to load a bolt pistol. 2 shots. The first took Vrenk in the right shoulder, spinning him sideways and sending his weapon clattering across the deck. The second hit his left knee, shattering the joint and dropping him face first onto the metal grating. Vrenk screamed, not the dignified grunt of a warrior taking his wounds stoically, but the high-pitched shriek of a man experiencing real pain for perhaps the first time in his career. Frank walked over, kicked away the dropped pistol, and crouched beside the writhing Commissar. Here's what I learned watching videos of myself executing innocent people this morning, Frank said conversationally, though his voice carried through the bay's acoustics. Every soldier heard. That was the point. The Imperium pulled me from somewhere else, scrambled my brain, and turned me into their attack dog. For 6 months I killed good people because someone told me it was legal. Medics helping the wounded, Vox operators calling for civilian evac, squadron leaders making smart tactical decisions. I killed them all because the law said I could. Vrenk clutched his ruined knee, teeth gritted against the pain. Then, you understand. The necessity? No, I understand that I was the bad guy, and now I've got 2,000 names I need to pay for. Frank grabbed Vrenk by his coat collar, hauling him partially upright. But before I figure out how to atone for my sins, I'm going to make damn sure I stop the other bastards doing the same thing. You can't. Commissarial authority, the Inquisition. The Inquisition can get in line. Frank looked at the 8 soldiers still kneeling, still bound, still waiting to die for the crime of being human. You 8, stand up. They scrambled to their feet, confusion warring with hope on their faces. Frank pulled his combat knife, cut their bonds one by one. Private Markov, you killed 3 orcs yesterday. Yes, sir, I tried to. 3 confirmed kills in your first major engagement. That's not inadequate. That's better than average for new troops. Frank sheathed the knife. Get back to your squad, all of you. Vrenk here won't be executing anyone else today. The soldiers didn't move, clearly waiting for the other boot to drop, for this to be some elaborate test before the real execution started. Frank understood that paralysis. He'd spent months teaching them to fear commissars more than the enemy. That's an order! Move! They ran. Smart kids. Frank turned back to Vrenk, who'd managed to prop himself against a support pillar, blood pooling beneath his shattered knee. The old commissar's face had gone pale with shock and blood loss, but his eyes still burned with righteous fury. You're a traitor, Castle. The Commissariat will execute you for this. Probably. Frank stood, holstered his pistol. But not before I work through my list. You're number 2, Vrenk. Throne was number 1. I've got 45 more commissars in this sector who think their badge gives them the right to murder anyone who shows fear or asks questions or just has a bad day. We maintain order. Without us, the Guard falls apart. Without you, maybe the Guard fights for something besides terror. Frank looked at the assembled soldiers, still standing in their hollow square, still not quite believing what they were witnessing. New rule for the 83rd. Your commissar is down. You need someone to maintain discipline. I'll do it. But I don't execute people for being tired or scared or sad. I execute traitors, chaos cultists, anyone who abandons their brothers or preys on the weak. You do your job, you watch your squad's back, you follow legitimate orders, we won't have problems. Clear, murmurs of assent. Louder than this morning. Word was spreading. Someone get a Medicae for Vrenk. Keep him alive. He's going to answer questions about every soldier he's executed. Frank started walking toward the bay exit, then paused. Oh, and Vrenk. You're under arrest for murder. About 47 counts. Maybe more once I dig through your personal files. The penalty for murder is death. But unlike you, I believe in investigations and evidence and making sure I'm actually executing the guilty. He left Vrenk bleeding on the deck, surrounded by the soldiers who'd feared him for years, and now saw him reduced to just another wounded man screaming for a Medicae. Let them see their monsters could bleed. Let them understand that authority wasn't absolute, that power had limits, that the system could be fought. Frank's data slate chimed. Incoming message from Captain Brennis. Sir, we've got reports of another Commissar executing wounded soldiers at the field hospital. Commissar Drakov, 22nd Penal Legion. He's killing men who need augmetics we can't provide. Says they're resource drains. Frank changed direction, heading for the hospital. His list was getting longer. Good. He had a lot of atoning to do, and it started with making sure no other Commissar could do what he'd done during those 6 missing months. Behind him, Medici rushed into the bay to treat Vrenk. They'd save him, probably. Patch him up. Process him through whatever passed for justice in the Imperium. But they wouldn't save the 47 soldiers he'd executed, or the hundreds more he would have killed if Frank hadn't put a bolt round through his knee. The Punisher was awake. The Punisher remembered. And the Punisher had work to do. The field hospital was 3 kilometers east. Frank started running. Somewhere ahead, a Commissar was executing wounded soldiers for the crime of bleeding in service to the Emperor. That Commissar had maybe 10 minutes left to live. The field hospital occupied a converted ammunition depot, which Frank considered grimly appropriate. The Imperium stored its bullets and bandages in the same kind of building because, to the bureaucrats planning logistics, there wasn't much difference between munitions expended and soldiers consumed. Both were resources. Both had acceptable loss rates. Both could be requisitioned in bulk and written off when depleted. Frank arrived to find Commissar Drakov standing over a soldier strapped to a surgical table, bolt pistol pressed against the man's forehead. The wounded guardsman, Frank's augmented memory identified him as Corporal Tyven, 22nd Penal Legion, age 27, stared up at his executioner with the hollow expression of someone who'd survived enemy fire only to be killed by his own side. Please, Tyven whispered, his voice barely audible over the moans of other wounded filling the ward. I can still fight. Give me a week, I can. You require augmetic reconstruction of your left arm and extensive tissue regeneration. Drakov's voice carried the bored professionalism of an accountant tallying expenses. He was younger than Vrenk, maybe 40, with the lean efficiency of someone who'd never wasted resources on anything, including empathy. The Medicae estimates 6 weeks recovery time and augmetics we cannot spare. You are a net resource drain. The Emperor has no use for broken tools. Frank counted 8 other wounded soldiers in the immediate area, all watching with the sick fascination of people witnessing their own future. Most were missing limbs, sporting lasburns, or wrapped in blood-soaked bandages that marked them as resource drains, waiting for Drakov's attention. A Medicae stood nearby, face carefully neutral, medical scanner still in hand, like she'd been mid-diagnosis when the Commissar arrived to streamline her patient list. Drakov. Frank's voice cut through the hospital's ambient suffering. Step away from the patient. The Commissar's head turned with mechanical precision, his pistol still pressed against Tyven's skull. Recognition flickered in Drakov's eyes. Word had clearly spread about Frank's morning activities. "Commissar Castle, I heard you executed Throne for enforcing discipline, then shot Vrenk for the same. Are you here to add me to your collection of murdered colleagues?" "Depends. You planning to execute a man for getting wounded in combat?" "I am planning to conserve vital Imperial resources by eliminating a soldier who can no longer contribute to military operations." Drakov's tone suggested he was explaining basic mathematics to a particularly slow child. The augmetics required for Corporal Tyvan's recovery could be used on 3 soldiers with minor injuries. The medical supplies could treat a dozen others. His caloric intake during 6 weeks of recovery could feed half a squad. By any logical assessment, his termination represents optimal resource allocation. Frank walked closer, his boots loud on the hospital's plastic flooring. "That's a lot of words for, I'm going to murder a man who bled for the Imperium. Murder implies illegality. I am authorized. You're authorized to maintain morale and discipline, not to execute wounded soldiers because they're inconvenient." Frank stopped 5 paces away, his hand resting on his holster. "Besides, your math is wrong. Tyvan's got 3 years' experience with the penal legions. Training a replacement takes 6 months minimum. His squad knows his fighting style, trusts him. You kill him, you don't just lose 1 soldier, you lose the squad cohesion that keeps 5 other men alive. But you don't think about that, do you? You just see numbers on a requisition form." Drakov's eyes narrowed. "Experience is irrelevant if he cannot fight. And I have executed 17 wounded soldiers this month using the same criteria. The 20 seconds combat efficiency has increased by 12% since I implemented this policy. Results speak for themselves." "Yeah, they do." Frank's voice dropped to the register that had made criminals on Earth reconsider their life choices in the seconds before he pulled the trigger. "They tell me you're killing men who can recover because you're too lazy to do the math properly. They tell me you value bullets over the soldiers who fire them. They tell me you're exactly the kind of bastard who makes this system work, and that's why you need to be removed from it." "Remove me?" Drakov actually smiled, the expression cold as void ice. "On what authority? You've already demonstrated your instability by executing 2 fellow commissars. When the Inquisition investigates, and they will investigate, they'll find a pattern of irrational violence against proper Imperial authority. You'll be lobotomized and servitorized within a week. Maybe, but you won't be alive to see it." Frank drew. Drakov was already moving, tried to swing his pistol from Tyvan to Frank, but Frank's first round took him in the right shoulder. The impact spun Drakov sideways, his shot going wide, blowing a chunk out of the wall behind Frank's head. The Commissar stumbled, but stayed upright, reaching for his pistol with his left hand. Frank's second shot destroyed Drakov's right kneecap. The Commissar went down hard, screaming, his bolt pistol skittering across the floor to land near the Medicae's feet. She looked at it, looked at Frank, made no move to pick it up. Smart woman. Frank walked over, kicked Drakov's weapon further away, and crouched beside the writhing Commissar. Drakov clutched his ruined knee with his functioning hand, blood pumping between his fingers in arterial spurts. The wound was bad, not immediately fatal, but bad enough that without treatment, he'd bleed out in maybe 30 minutes. "Medicae," Frank called without taking his eyes off Drakov. "What's your name?" Senior Medicae Helvin, sir." Her voice was steady despite the fear Frank could see in her eyes. Good, fear was healthy. Fear kept you alive in the 41st millennium. "Helvin, in your professional opinion, how long does Commissar Drakov have before he bleeds out from that knee wound?" She approached cautiously, ran her medical scanner over Drakov's leg. 27 minutes, sir. Possibly less if he continues struggling. He requires immediate surgical intervention, biosealant, and augmetic joint reconstruction. Recovery time approximately 6 weeks. Frank nodded slowly, looking down at Drakov. The The Commissar's face had gone pale, his breathing rapid and shallow as shock set in. Hear that, Drakov? You need 6 weeks recovery, same as Tyvan. Except you're conscious and can tell me exactly how much you're suffering. You can't... Drakov's voice came in ragged gasps. Medical treatment required for commissariat personnel. Is it? Frank stood, pulled out his data slate, made a show of checking something. Let me see here. Commissar Drakov, age 42, 17 years service. Training a replacement commissar takes, 5 years minimum at the Schola Progenium, plus another 3 to build practical experience. So 8 years total. He looked down at Drakov with mock sympathy. But by your own logic, that's irrelevant if you can't fight. And right now, you definitely can't fight. Understanding dawned in Drakov's eyes. No, please, I was just following doctrine. You were just executing wounded soldiers because the math was convenient. Said so yourself. 17 men this month. Frank crouched again, getting close to Drakov's face. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to lie there and think about those 17 soldiers. Think about their faces. Think about how they begged, just like you're about to beg. And when you've thought about it long enough, when you really understand what you did to them, I'll decide if you're worth the resources to save. Castle, please! Drakov's voice rose to a scream. I need medical attention. The pain. Conserve resources. Frank stood again, turned to Helvin. Medicae. Treat Corporal Tyvan first, then the other wounded. When you're done with everyone else, if Drakov's still alive, and if I say so, you can patch him up. Maybe. Helvin's eyes widened. Sir, commissariat regulations require priority medical treatment for... Are you refusing my direct order? Frank let his hand rest on his pistol. She swallowed hard. No, sir. Treating Corporal Tyvan now, sir. Frank watched as she moved to Tyvan's table, began running scans, preparing surgical equipment. The other wounded watched with expressions ranging from disbelief to savage satisfaction. They'd all seen Drakov execute their brothers over the past month. Now they were watching him bleed out while the Medicae who'd been forced to witness those executions ignored his screams for help. Poetic justice, the kind Frank had always appreciated. Drakov kept screaming, kept begging, kept bleeding. 27 minutes, the Medicae had said. Frank checked his chronometer and settled in to wait. He had questions for Drakov about the other commissars in the sector, about the inquisitors who'd authorized this brutality, about the chain of command that had turned the commissariat into a murder machine with official sanction. But first, Drakov needed to understand what he'd done, needed to feel it, needed to lie in spreading pool of his own blood and contemplate the 17 soldiers who died alone and terrified because he'd decided they weren't worth the resources to save. Around them, the field hospital continued its grim work. Medicae Helvin stabilized Tyvan, moved on to the next wounded soldier, then the next. She worked with efficient calm, never once looking at Drakov, despite his increasingly desperate pleas. The other wounded watched in silence, understanding they were witnessing something unprecedented, a commissar experiencing consequences. 20 minutes passed. Drakov's screams had faded to whimpers. His face was grey, his hands slick with blood. Frank crouched beside him again. Those 17 soldiers, Frank said quietly. Did any of them beg? Drakov's eyes were unfocused, but he managed a nod. Did you listen? A shake of the head. Did you show mercy? Even once? Another shake. Then why should I? Drakov's mouth worked, trying to form words. I was wrong. Please. I understand now. Please. Frank checked his chronometer. 26 minutes. One more minute and Drakov would be beyond saving even with immediate intervention. One more minute and Frank would have executed another commissar, adding another name to the list of deaths weighing on his conscience. The difference was, Drakov actually deserved it. Frank stood. Medicae Helvin, you can treat him now. Helvin blinked in surprise but moved immediately, already pulling biosealant and surgical equipment. She'd save Drakov, probably, if she worked fast enough. Frank walked toward the hospital exit, his data slate chiming with another incoming message. More reports of commissariat abuses, more names for his list, more bastards who thought their authority made them untouchable. Behind him, Drakov whimpered as Helvin worked to stop the bleeding. He'd live, but he'd remember those 26 minutes for the rest of his life. Remember what it felt like to be on the other side of his own doctrine. Remember that the Punisher had given him mercy he'd never shown others, and that mercy tasted like blood and terror and the knowledge that he'd gotten off easy. Frank Castle had 3 names crossed off his list now. Throne, Vrenk, Drakov. 45 more to go. The Vox network across Firebase Kratos Prime crackled with encrypted traffic all afternoon, but Frank didn't need to break the codes to know what they were saying. 3 commissars attacked in one day, 1 dead, 2 crippled. The remaining commissars in the sector were either going to ground or organizing a response. Frank gave it 4 hours before someone made their move. He was wrong. It took 3. The attack came at 1800 hours during evening meal. Frank was in the officers' mess, alone because even the officers who agreed with his crusade weren't stupid enough to be seen eating with him, when Commissar Hela walked through the door with 6 armed stormtroopers at her back. Hela was different from the others. Younger, maybe 35, with the kind of cold beauty that made men stupid, and the dead eyes that suggested she'd killed more people than Frank had on his worst day. Her commissar's coat fit like it had been tailored by someone who understood that authority could be as much about appearance as action. The stormtroopers carried hellguns, their carapace armor marked with the commissariat's skull and laurel insignia. Professional, dangerous. Nothing like the standard guard infantry Frank had been dealing with. Commissar Castle. Hela's voice carried across the mess hall like a judge pronouncing sentence. You're under arrest for the murder of Commissar Throne, attempted murder of Commissar Vrenk, and assault on Commissar Drakov. You will surrender your weapons and come with us for inquisitorial interrogation. Frank set down his recaf, studied the 6 hellguns aimed at his chest. Good firing positions, overlapping fields of fire, fingers on triggers, but not squeezing yet. They'd trained for this, probably drilled it 100 times. Arrest the rogue commissar, suppress any resistance, deliver the prisoner for processing. No. Frank pushed his chair back slowly, hands visible. I don't think I will. Hela's eyebrow raised fractionally. That wasn't a request. You've murdered fellow commissars, attacked Imperial authority. The penalty is death or worse. Your only choice is whether you come quietly or in pieces. Third option. Frank's hand dropped toward his bolt pistol. I kill you and anyone stupid enough to stand in my way. Then I keep doing what I'm doing until every corrupt commissar in this sector is dead or behind bars. Fire, Hela said calmly. The stormtroopers squeezed their triggers, 6 hellguns discharged simultaneously, las bolts screaming across the mess hall hot enough to vaporize armor plate. Frank was already moving. He'd seen the eye flick, the micro-expression that said Hela was giving the order a half second before she spoke. Old habits from Earth, reading body language, anticipating violence. Frank threw himself sideways, the table he'd been sitting at flipping up to serve as cover. Las bolts punched through the plastic surface, superheating the material into bubbling slag, but the table was thick enough to slow the beams fractionally. Frank hit the floor rolling, came up behind a support pillar. Return fire punched chunks out of the rockcrete, showering him with debris. 6 targets, professional shooters, enclosed space. Bad odds even for someone with Frank's experience. So he'd make the odds better. Frank's first bolt round took the leftmost stormtrooper in the throat, just above his carapace armor's gorget. The explosive shell detonated, sending the trooper's head spinning across the room in a spray of red mist. The other 5 adjusted their fire, converging on Frank's position. He was already gone, moving to the next pillar. The mess hall was large, designed to feed 300 soldiers, with dozens of support columns and overturned tables providing cover. Frank used all of it, firing and moving, never staying in one position long enough for concentrated fire. Second trooper went down with a bolt round through his weapon, the hellgun exploding and taking his hands with it. He screamed, dropped, bleeding out. 4 left. Third trooper made the mistake of pursuing too aggressively. Frank let him get close, waited until the man rounded a pillar, then grabbed the hellgun barrel with his left hand and shoved it skyward, while his right hand drove his combat knife through the gap between chest and shoulder armor. The blade found the subclavian artery. The trooper spasmed, died standing up, and Frank used the corpse as a shield while he put a bolt round through the fourth trooper's faceplate. 3 down, 3 to go. Bad odds becoming manageable odds. Then Healer joined the fight. She was fast, faster than anyone had a right to be in commissariat armor. Her power sword cleared its sheath in a blur of blue energy, the disruption field screaming as it ionized the air. She closed the distance to Frank while her remaining 2 stormtroopers laid down suppressing fire, driving him back toward the kitchen area. Frank tried to shoot her. She deflected the bolt round with her sword, actually deflected it, the explosive shell detonating against the power field in a flash of light and concussive force. Then she was inside his guard, sword arcing toward his neck. He blocked with his bolt pistol. The power sword sheared through the weapon like it was paper, kept going, would have taken Frank's head off if he hadn't thrown himself backward. The sword missed by centimeters, close enough that he felt the heat of the disruption field singe his face. Frank crashed into a prep counter, metal instruments scattering. Heller followed, sword raised for a killing strike. No time to draw his backup pistol, no time to retreat. Frank grabbed a meat cleaver from the counter, brought it up to block. The power sword cut through the cleaver and bit into Frank's left shoulder. Pain exploded through his arm as the disruption field seared flesh and muscle. The smell of his own burning meat filled his nostrils. Frank screamed, not from pain but from rage, and drove his knee into Healer's solar plexus. She grunted, stumbled back half a step. Frank used the opening to grab a handful of cooking oil from a broken container and fling it in her face. She flinched, human reflex unavoidable, and Frank tackled her. They went down hard. The power sword skittered across the floor. Frank ended up on top, his ruined left arm useless, his right hand scrambling for the combat knife on his belt. Heller was stronger than she looked, enhanced by rejuvenate treatments or combat drugs or just natural genetics. She bucked him off, rolled, came up, reaching for her bolt pistol. Frank's knife caught her wrist, pinned it to the floor. She screamed, tried to pull free. He leaned his full weight on the blade, feeling bone grind against metal. Her hand spasmed open, the pistol dropping. The 2 remaining stormtroopers were converging, hellguns raised. Frank had maybe 2 seconds before they got a clean shot. Not enough time to kill Healer, enough time to hurt her. He yanked the knife free, slashed across her face. Not a killing blow, her head was moving, but enough to open her cheek from ear to jaw. Blood sheeted down her neck, soaking into her pristine coat. She shrieked, hands flying to her ruined face. Frank rolled away as hellgun fire tore through the space he'd occupied, came up behind an industrial stove, hot enough from the evening's cooking to make the air shimmer. The stormtroopers were advancing, coordinated, professional, hellguns tracking for any exposed target. Frank grabbed the stove's fuel line, ripped it free. Promethium sprayed across the kitchen in a pressurized stream. The stormtroopers saw it coming, tried to adjust their aim away from the fuel. Too late. Frank shot the puddle of promethium forming at their feet. The kitchen exploded into flame. Both stormtroopers vanished in a fireball of burning fuel and superheated air. Their screams lasted 5 seconds before their lungs flash-cooked, then just the sound of burning meat and melting armor. Frank staggered to his feet, his left arm hanging useless, blood running down his side from the shoulder wound. The fire was spreading, consuming the kitchen, starting to reach the main mess hall. Smoke filled the air, thick and black, triggering the automated fire suppression systems. Foam began spraying from ceiling nozzles. Hayla was crawling toward the exit, one hand pressed to her face, leaving a trail of blood. Frank followed, grabbed her by the collar, hauled her upright. She tried to fight, weakly, but between blood loss and shock, she had nothing left. "Listen to me," Frank growled, his face inches from hers. "You tell the other commissars what happened here. Tell them I'm coming for every single one who thinks their badge gives them the right to prey on the weak. Tell them the Punisher is hunting them." "You're insane." Blood bubbled from Hela's mouth. "The Inquisition will lobotomize you. Maybe. But first I'm going to make sure your corruption dies with you." Frank shoved her toward the exit. She stumbled, fell, crawled through the foam and smoke toward safety. He let her go. Dead martyrs inspired resistance. Broken survivors spread fear. Frank stood in the burning mess hall, surrounded by corpses and flames, his left arm useless and his coat soaked with blood. 6 stormtroopers dead, 1 commissar mutilated, and somewhere in the fortress, other commissars were hearing about this, understanding that Frank Castle wasn't just executing the corrupt, he was going to war with the entire system. His data slate chimed. Incoming message from Captain Brennus. "Sir, the Commissariat Council is convening emergency session. They're calling for your immediate arrest and execution. Inquisitor is en route from the capital. ETA 6 hours. 6 hours, not much time." Frank checked his remaining ammunition. 4 bolt rounds, half a magazine for his backup pistol, his combat knife, now slick with Hela's blood, and the knowledge that he'd just declared war on an organization with the authority to execute anyone, anywhere, for any reason. The fire suppression systems were winning their battle with the flames. The smoke was clearing. And somewhere out there, 42 more commissars were realizing that their absolute authority had just met someone who didn't care about authority, didn't fear execution, and had absolutely nothing left to lose. Frank Castle walked out of the burning mess hall, his shadow stretching long behind him in the firelight. He had a list to finish, and only 6 hours to do it. Time to work fast. The Commissariat Council met in the fortress's command spire, a brutalist tower of rockcrete and steel that scraped the toxic clouds of Kratos Prime's upper atmosphere. Frank approached it openly, no stealth, no subtlety, just a wounded commissar walking through the evening darkness with blood soaking his coat and murder in his eyes. Soldiers saw him coming and scattered. Word had spread. The mad commissar who killed his own kind, the Punisher unleashed in the 41st millennium. The spire's entrance was guarded by 4 Commissariat enforcers, elite stormtroopers who'd survived long enough to earn specialized training in putting down rogue Imperial servants. They had heavy carapace armor, hell guns, and frag grenades clipped to their webbing. Professional killers who'd probably been briefed on Frank's approach and told to stop him by any means necessary. Frank walked up to them and didn't slow down. "Halt!" The lead enforcer raised his hell gun. "Commissar Castle, you are ordered to—" Frank shot him in the face. The bolt round punched through the enforcer's helmet and detonated inside his skull, turning his head into red vapor. The other 3 were already moving, training kicking in, hell guns coming up. Frank was faster. 2 more shots, 2 more corpses. The 4th enforcer got his weapon up, fired, the last bolt searing past Frank's ear close enough to leave a burn mark. Frank's return shot took him in the throat, right above his armor's gorget. Same kill shot he'd used in the mess hall. If it worked once, it worked twice. 4 bodies, 3 bolt rounds remaining. Frank reloaded with a fresh magazine from the dead enforcer's webbing. They all carried bolt pistol ammunition as backup, standard procedure, and pushed through the entrance into the spire. The interior was all Imperial Gothic architecture, vaulted ceilings, brass aquillas, walls covered in purity seals, and devotional scripture. The kind of space designed to remind anyone entering that they stood in the Emperor's presence. that their lives were meaningless compared to his eternal glory, that obedience was the only virtue that mattered. Frank had stopped caring about obedience around the time he watched himself execute a Medicae for saving lives. He took the stairs rather than the elevator. Elevators were death traps, enclosed spaces where one frag grenade could end everything. The stairs gave him options, angles, the ability to hear threats coming. His left arm was regaining some function. The power sword had cauterized as it cut, preventing major blood loss, but it was weak, unreliable. He'd have to fight mostly one-handed. Wouldn't be the first time. The Commissariat Council met on the spire's 13th level, in a chamber designed for passing judgment on others. Frank had accessed the building's floor plan from a terminal in the entrance, learned the layout, plotted his approach. 3 entrances to the council chamber, 1 main door, heavily guarded, 2 service entrances, probably watched but less fortified. Frank went through the wall. He found a maintenance closet adjacent to the council chamber, checked the wall composition, standard rockcrete, reinforced with steel mesh but nothing exotic, and placed the shaped charges he'd taken from the 501st's armory before coming here. The Imperium built everything to withstand orbital bombardment, but interior walls weren't meant to stop determined sabotage from someone who knew what he was doing. The charges blew. The wall exploded inward in a shower of debris and smoke. Frank went through the gap before the dust settled, bolt pistol up, scanning for targets. The Commissariat Council stared at him from behind a semicircular table carved from a single piece of black stone. 13 commissars, representing every regiment in the Kratos Prime sector, 12 men and 1 woman, all wearing their formal greatcoats, all armed, all looking at the madman who'd just blown a hole in their sanctum, with expressions ranging from shock to fury to barely concealed fear. Commissar General Kreutz sat at the table's center, the highest-ranking commissar in the sector. He was older than Vrenk, perhaps 70 standard years, with augmetic eyes that glowed red in the chamber's dim lighting, and a face that looked like it had been carved from the same black stone as the table. His service record was legendary: 50 years as a commissar, 300 confirmed executions of Imperial personnel, dozens of campaigns where his ruthless enforcement of discipline had held broken regiments together through impossible odds. He was also the architect of the sector's execution quotas, the man who'd ordered commissars to maintain acceptable disciplinary kill rates to prove they were doing their jobs. Commissar Castle. Kreutz's voice was machine-precise, filtered through a Vox implant that turned his words into mechanical thunder. You have murdered a fellow commissar, assaulted 3 others, and now you dare to violate the sanctity of this council. Give me one reason why we shouldn't execute you where you stand. Frank counted the pistols pointed at him. 13. Plus however many guards were converging on his position from outside the chamber. Terrible odds. Suicidal even. Good thing Frank had stopped caring about survival around the same time he'd learned what he'd been doing for 6 months. Because if you execute me, you don't learn why the Inquisition pulled me from another reality, scrambled my brain, and turned me into your murder machine. Frank's pistol stayed level, not aimed at any specific target, but positioned to shoot whoever moved first. You don't learn that they've been doing this to others. You don't learn that the entire commissariat is one big experiment in how much brutality the Imperial Guard can take before it breaks. That got their attention. 13 pistols stayed raised, but nobody fired. Curiosity, or maybe fear of what Frank knew, buying him a few more seconds of life. Explain, Kreutz demanded. The Inquisition found me somewhere called Earth. Different place, different reality, no emperor, no warp, just humans trying to survive without all your gothic horror show bullshit. Frank's voice was steady despite the pain radiating from his shoulder. I was already a killer there, called myself the Punisher, hunted criminals, mobsters, murderers, anyone who preyed on the innocent. I was good at it, Very good. So good that when your inquisitors pulled me through some warp anomaly, they looked at my record and thought, hey, this guy already kills people. Let's make him kill people for us. Ridiculous. One of the other commissars spat. The warp doesn't create stable portals to... I don't care about the science. I care that they mind-wiped me, fed me 6 months of false memories, and turned me into Commissar Frank Castle, loyal servant of the Emperor, enthusiastic executioner of anyone who showed weakness. Frank's finger tightened on the trigger. I care that I spent those 6 months killing good people, medics who saved lives, Vox operators who tried to evacuate civilians, squadron leaders who made smart tactical calls. I executed them all because you bastards convinced me it was legal. It is legal, Kreutz said flatly. Commissarial doctrine clearly states. I know what the doctrine states. I helped enforce it. 2,000 confirmed kills, remember? Frank's voice rose. But here's what none of you understand, because you were all raised in this nightmare from birth. On Earth, we had a word for people who killed the innocent just because authority said they could. We called them war criminals. We hunted them. We executed them. And the punishment for being a war criminal was death. This isn't Earth, another commissar growled. This is the Imperium. We hold the line against chaos, xenos, and heresy. Without our discipline, without your discipline, maybe soldiers would fight for something besides terror. Maybe they'd die for their brothers instead of running from you. Maybe you'd have loyalty instead of fear, and the guard would be stronger for it. Frank took a step forward. 13 pistols tracked him. But you'll never know, because you're all so invested in this system, so convinced that brutality is the only answer, that you can't even imagine an alternative. There is no alternative. Kreutz stood slowly, his augmetic eyes burning like coals. The Imperium spans 1 million worlds, 10 billion soldiers, 1 million regiments. We cannot maintain discipline through kindness and understanding. We maintain it through fear, through absolute authority, through the knowledge that disobedience means death. You think you can change that? You think one rogue commissar can overthrow 10,000 years of doctrine? No. Frank smiled without humor. I think I can kill every commissar in this sector who abuses his authority, and when the Inquisition asks why, I'll tell them I was just following the law. The law that says criminals deserve punishment. The law that says people who murder the innocent are guilty. Your law. The one you've been hiding behind while you committed atrocities. Silence filled the chamber. Outside, Frank could hear boots pounding up the stairs. Reinforcements coming. Maybe a minute before they arrived. Maybe less. Kreutz leaned forward, his augmetic eyes boring into Frank. You're one man, wounded, outnumbered. Even if you kill us all, which you can't, the Inquisition will simply designate you a heretic and erase your existence. No one will remember Commissar Castle. No one will remember your crusade. You will die, and nothing will change. Maybe. Frank's grip tightened on his pistol. But those 4 soldiers I saved today, they'll remember. The 8 I freed from Vrenk, they'll remember. Corporal Tyven, still alive because I stopped Dreykov, he'll remember. You can't erase them all. You can't silence everyone who saw a commissar fight for them instead of against them. And when word spreads, when soldiers across this sector learn that one commissar chose justice over terror, you can't stop them from asking why the others don't do the same. Idealistic nonsense, Kreutz said. But something flickered in his augmetic eyes. Uncertainty, maybe, or the first hint of fear. Frank raised his pistol, aimed it directly at Kreutz. Here's what happens next. You let me walk out of here, or I start shooting. Either way, I'm leaving. Either way, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing until the Inquisition stops me. But if you let me walk, maybe, just maybe, some of you will start asking if I'm right. Start questioning whether execution is really the only tool you have. start wondering if there's a better way. And if we don't let you walk, then you die first. And I spend my last magazine making sure as many of you as possible die with you. Your choice. The boots in the stairwell were getting closer. Maybe 30 seconds. Kreutz's augmetic eyes flickered, processing calculations, weighing options. Around the table, the other commissars watched their leader, waiting for the order to fire. Kreutz lowered his pistol. "Let him go," the commissar general said quietly. "Sir?" One of the other commissars stared in disbelief. "He murdered Throne. He assaulted. I said, let him go." Kreutz's voice thundered through his Vox implant. "Commissar Castle is clearly deranged from his injuries. He requires medical attention and psychological evaluation. We will remand him to inquisitorial custody when they arrive. Until then, he is free to seek treatment." Translation: "We're letting the Inquisition deal with him because I don't want to be the one who starts the firefight that kills half this council." Frank backed toward the hole he'd blown in the wall, pistol still raised. "Smart choice, but Kreutz, you should know. I've got recordings of every execution I made during my 6 missing months. Videos of me killing medics, Vox operators, squadron leaders, all of them innocent, all of them following your doctrine. When the Inquisition interrogates me, I'm showing them everything. Let them decide if your system is working or if it's just producing monsters." He vanished through the hole before anyone could respond. Behind him, he heard the council erupt into argument, 13 voices shouting about protocol and authority and what the hell they were going to tell the Inquisitor when he arrived. Frank didn't care. He had 5 hours before the Inquisitor landed, 5 hours to finish his list, to save as many soldiers as he could, to make sure that when the Inquisition finally caught him, he'd done enough damage that they couldn't just sweep it under the rug. The Punisher was hunting, and in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, even the hunters could be hunted. Time to make it count. Frank made it 3 blocks from the command spire before the ambush hit. They came from the shadows between hab blocks, 8 figures in dark combat gear without commissariat markings. Not stormtroopers, not regular guard. Something else. Frank's enhanced memory supplied the answer even as he dove for cover. Inquisitorial operatives, advanced scouts for the main force, sent ahead to contain the situation before it escalated further. Too late for that. Lasfire screamed through the darkness, stitching lines of superheated death across the rockcrete where Frank had been standing. He rolled behind a burned-out Chimera transport, its armor scarred from some previous battle, now serving as improvised cover in a firefight that would determine whether he lived to finish his list. "Commissar Castle," a voice called from the shadows, cultured and calm. "I am Agent Vex of the Ordo Hereticus. You are wanted for questioning regarding multiple violations of Imperial law. Surrender immediately, and your death will be swift and painless." Frank checked his ammunition. 1 magazine in his pistol, 1 spare. Maybe 30 rounds total, against 8 trained operatives with superior positioning and equipment. The math wasn't good. He'd worked with worse odds. "Counteroffer," Frank shouted back. "You let me finish what I'm doing, and when the Inquisitor arrives, I'll answer every question he's got. Full cooperation. I'll even tell him about the corruption in the Commissariat and how your boss has been running unauthorized experiments with warp-touched assets." Silence for a moment. Then, "I'm afraid we can't accept those terms. You've killed Imperial servants. You've violated the sanctity of the Commissariat. Your existence is now a threat to Imperial authority. Please understand, this isn't personal." It never is. Frank leaned around the Chimera's hull, fired 3 quick shots at muzzle flashes in the darkness. One scream suggested he'd hit something. But here's the thing about authority. It only works if people believe in it. And right now, every soldier on this base is watching to see if the system protects them or kills them. More lasfire answered him, punching holes in the Chimera's already damaged armor. Frank moved, staying low, using the transport as mobile cover, while he worked his way toward the nearest hab block. If he could get inside, lose them in the corridors, he might survive long enough to... The grenade landed 3 feet from his position. Frank saw it, recognized it. Frag grenade, standard Imperial issue, 3-second fuse already burning. No time to throw it back, no time to run. He grabbed the Chimera's access hatch, yanked it open, dove inside the transport's gutted interior as the grenade detonated. Shrapnel screamed through the air where he'd been standing. The Chimera rocked from the blast, its damaged armor absorbing most of the fragmentation, but buckling under the pressure. Frank's ears rang, his vision swimming, blood running from a dozen small cuts where shrapnel had found gaps in his cover. But he was alive. The inquisitorial operatives were advancing now, thinking he was wounded or stunned. Frank heard their boots on rockcrete, the quiet vox chatter of professionals coordinating their approach. They'd sweep the Chimera, find him, and execute him with the same clinical efficiency he'd once used on his own targets. Frank pulled the pin on his last frag grenade, taken from the stormtrooper at the spire entrance, and threw it blind through the Chimera's top hatch. The explosion was immediate and devastating. Screams, the wet thud of bodies hitting ground. Frank erupted from the Chimera's side hatch, pistol up, firing at anything that moved. 2 operatives went down immediately, caught in the open by Frank's aggressive counterattack. A third took a round in the leg, collapsed, tried to raise his weapon. Frank's boot caught him in the face, crushing his nose, slamming his head back against rockcrete hard enough to crack skull. The operative went limp. 5 down, 3 to go. Last fire from his right. Frank twisted, took a glancing hit across his ribs. The shot burned through his coat, seared flesh, left a cauterized wound that hurt like touching a live wire. He returned fire, forced the shooter back into cover, then sprinted for the hab block entrance. He made it inside as more las fire tore chunks from the doorframe. The building's interior was dark, lit only by failing lumens that flickered like dying stars. Frank moved through the corridors by memory and instinct, the layout generic enough that it matched a dozen other Imperial structures he'd operated in during his 6 stolen months. Behind him, boots echoed. The remaining operatives were following, cautious now, having lost 5 of their number to a wounded target they'd assumed would be easy to eliminate. Frank could hear their vox chatter, could hear Agent Vex coordinating the pursuit with the cold professionalism of someone who'd hunted rogue Imperial servants before. Frank reached a stairwell, started climbing. Not because he had a destination in mind, just because moving meant living, and stopping meant dying. His body was failing. Blood loss, exhaustion, pain from a dozen wounds catching up with him. The adrenaline that had carried him through the evening was wearing off, leaving him with the cold realization that he was one man running from an organization with infinite resources and zero tolerance for disobedience. 4th floor, 5th floor. The operatives were gaining, their superior conditioning and uninjured bodies letting them close the gap. Frank's left arm was useless again, the power sword wound breaking open under the stress of climbing stairs. Each step left a red footprint. He was leaving a blood trail a blind servitor could follow. 6th floor. Frank stumbled, caught himself on the railing, kept moving. Behind him, much closer now. Target is wounded and slowing, converging on 6th floor. Prepare for... Frank kicked open the nearest hab unit door, empty, its occupants evacuated or dead, and dove inside. He landed badly on his injured shoulder, bit back a scream, rolled to his feet as the first operative came through the door. The man was fast, professional, already tracking with his laser gun as he entered. Frank shot him in the face from 3 feet away. The operative's head snapped back, body dropping like a puppet with cut strings. 2 left. Las fire from the corridor. Frank returned fire, forcing them back, buying seconds. His pistol's slide locked back. Empty. He grabbed the dead operative's laser gun, checked the charge, 60%, and switched to full auto. The next operative came through the door low and fast, trying to avoid Frank's firing arc. Good tactic. Would have worked against most targets. Frank shot him anyway, walking a line of lasfire across his chest armor until the carapace failed and the beams burned through to flesh beneath. One left. Agent Vex entered calmly, unhurried, with his last pistol raised and his expression utterly neutral. He was older than the others, maybe 50, with the kind of face that had seen too much horror to be shocked by anything. He looked at his dead operatives, looked at Frank bleeding on the floor, and sighed. "Impressive," Vex said. "8 operatives, all dead, and you're still fighting. I can see why the Inquisition was interested in you." Frank aimed the laser gun at Vex's chest. "You here to talk or die?" "Both, actually." Vex didn't lower his weapon. "I have orders to eliminate you, but I'm also authorized to make a deal if you're willing to listen." "I'm listening." Frank's finger was on the trigger. One squeeze, and Vex would die. But curiosity, and the fact that killing an inquisitorial agent would bring consequences even Frank couldn't handle, stayed his hand. "The Inquisitor arriving in 4 hours isn't here to arrest you. He's here to recruit you." Vex smiled without humor. "You see, Castle, you've done something remarkable. You've exposed systematic corruption in the Commissariat. You've demonstrated that absolute authority without oversight creates monsters. And you've survived long enough to make it impossible for us to quietly eliminate you. Soldiers are watching. Officers are asking questions. Even other commissars are wondering if maybe, just maybe, you have a point. So what's the offer? Work for the Inquisition directly. Use your particular skills to hunt corrupt Imperial servants across the sector. You want to kill bad commissars? We'll give you the authority to do it legally. You want to protect soldiers from abusive authority? We'll make you the oversight mechanism. You'll be our weapon against internal corruption, sanctioned, supported, and aimed at legitimate targets instead of operating as a rogue element. Frank studied Vex's face, looking for the lie. Didn't find one. The agent believed what he was saying, which meant either the Inquisition genuinely wanted to reform, or they wanted to control Frank's crusade before it inspired others to question Imperial authority. Probably the latter. And if I refuse, then I kill you here. The Inquisitor declares you a heretic, and your entire crusade becomes a cautionary tale about what happens when commissars go insane. The soldiers you saved forget you. The commissars you exposed get quietly reassigned. Nothing changes. Vex's finger tightened on his trigger. This is your only chance to make a difference, Castle. Take it or die. Frank looked at the laser gun in his hands, at the bodies of operatives he'd killed, at the blood soaking his coat and pooling on the floor beneath him. He was dying anyway. Blood loss, shock, infected wounds. Maybe another hour if he was lucky, maybe less. But if he accepted Vex's offer, he'd live. He'd have authority to continue his hunt, to expose corruption, to protect soldiers from the system that was supposed to lead them. Sure, he'd be working for the same Inquisition that had scrambled his brain and turned him into a murder machine. Sure, he'd be compromising everything he believed about fighting corrupt authority. But he'd be alive. And alive meant he could keep fighting. Frank lowered the laser gun. "I want it in writing," he said. "Full authority to investigate and execute corrupt Imperial servants. No restrictions, no oversight beyond the Inquisitor himself. And I want access to every file the Inquisition has on warp-touched assets pulled from other realities. If they did this to me, they've done it to others. I want to know who and why." Vex smiled. "Done. Welcome to the Ordo Hereticus, Commissar Castle. Or should I say, Interrogator Castle. Just call me Frank." He let the laser gun clatter to the floor. "And get me a medici before I bleed out. I've got work to do." Vex activated his Vox. "Command, this is Vex. Target secured and recruited. Send medical team to my position and inform Inquisitor Eisenhorn that his new interrogator will be ready for briefing in approximately 6 hours." Frank closed his eyes, letting exhaustion wash over him. He'd survived. Against impossible odds, against 8 trained operatives, Against his own body's attempts to shut down, he'd survived. And now he had exactly what he'd wanted: authority to hunt the corrupt, power to protect the innocent, and the backing of an organization that could make his crusade permanent. The question was whether he'd just accepted a genuine chance to change the system, or walked into a trap that would turn him into exactly what he'd been fighting against. Frank supposed he'd find out. In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, there were no good choices, only less terrible ones. The Medici facility attached to the inquisitorial compound was nothing like the field hospitals Frank had seen. This was precision healthcare for the Emperor's chosen instruments, sterile white walls, advanced medical servitors that moved with eerie silence, and equipment that probably cost more than an entire guard regiment's annual supply budget. Frank lay on a surgical table while a cherub servitor stitched his shoulder with monofilament thread, and a tech priest calibrated the augmetic nerve stimulators that would restore full function to his arm. Inquisitor Gregor Eisenhorn stood nearby, watching the procedure with the detached interest of someone observing a weapon being repaired. He was younger than Frank expected, maybe 40, with sharp features, grey eyes that missed nothing, and the kind of controlled intensity that marked true believers who'd seen their faith tested and come out harder for it. "Tell me about Earth," Eisenhorn said without preamble. Frank winced as the cherub servitor pulled thread tight. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. Agent Vex's report suggests you come from a reality without the Emperor, without the warp, without any of the structures that maintain human civilization in our galaxy. Yet you survived, thrived even. How?" "We had law, justice systems, governments that at least pretended to care about accountability." Frank's jaw clenched as the tech priest injected him with something that made his arm burn like fire. "We had corruption too, always do when humans are involved, but we also had people willing to fight it. Sometimes officially, sometimes," he met Eisenhorn's eyes, "sometimes unofficially. And you were one of the unofficial fighters." "I was a Marine, did 3 tours, came home to find my family murdered by criminals the justice system couldn't touch. So I became the justice system, hunted them, killed them, spent years doing it. The cops called me a vigilante. The criminals called me the Punisher. I didn't care what they called me as long as the guilty paid for their crimes." Eisenhorn nodded slowly. "A man who enforces justice outside official channels because the official channels have failed. In the Imperium, we call such men heretics and execute them. Yet here I am, offering you a position within those same official channels. Do you see the irony?" "I see the trap." Frank sat up despite the Medici's protests, ignored the pain lancing through his shoulder. "You're not recruiting me to fix corruption. You're recruiting me to contain it. Make sure my crusade doesn't inspire others to question imperial authority. Give me just enough freedom to feel like I'm making a difference while you use me to eliminate problems you can't officially acknowledge exist." Partially correct. Eisenhorn pulled up a chair, sat across from Frank like they were discussing philosophy over drinks instead of revolutionary action in a fascist theocracy. "Yes, we're containing you. Your actions over the past day have created ripples we can't ignore. Soldiers are asking questions. Officers are reconsidering standing orders. Even commissars are debating whether summary execution is truly the only tool for maintaining discipline. That kind of thinking is dangerous." "Dangerous to who? The Imperium or the people running it?" "Both. Because the Imperium is the people running it. There is no separation between the system and those who enforce it. When you attack corrupt commissars, you attack the concept of commissarial authority. When you question brutal discipline, you question the foundation of imperial military doctrine. And when 10 billion soldiers start asking those same questions..." Eisenhorn leaned forward. "Empires don't fall to external threats, Castle. They fall when the people enforcing the system stop believing in it. Frank studied the Inquisitor's face. So why not just kill me? Why offer this deal? Because you're right. The words hung in the sterile air between them. Outside, servitors moved through their programmed routines. Somewhere in the compound, other inquisitorial operatives prepared for missions Frank couldn't imagine. But in this moment, in this room, an inquisitor of the Ordo Hereticus had just admitted that the Imperium's own enforcer was correct about its corruption. The Commissariat has become exactly what you accused it of being, Eisenhorn continued. A murder machine with official sanction. We've created a system where the only way for commissars to prove their worth is through execution statistics. Kill enough of your own men, you get promoted. Kill too few, you're seen as weak. The incentive structure ensures brutality, rewards paranoia, and punishes mercy. And the Inquisition allowed this because for 10,000 years it worked. The Commissariat held broken regiments together through impossible odds. They prevented mass desertions. They maintained discipline in armies composed of conscripts from 1 million different worlds who spoke different languages and worshipped the Emperor in different ways. The system was brutal but functional, until it wasn't. Eisenhorn pulled out a data slate, showed Frank a series of reports. Casualty statistics, morale assessments, desertion rates. Over the past century, something changed. Commissarial executions increased by 300%. Regimental cohesion decreased by 40%. Desertion rates are at an all-time high despite, or perhaps because of, increased enforcement. The system is eating itself. So you want me to fix it? I want you to be the scalpel that cuts out the cancer before it kills the patient. Eisenhorn's grey eyes burned with intensity. The Commissariat needs reform, but reform from within is impossible. The corrupt protect each other. The system rewards brutality, and anyone who speaks out gets labeled a heretic. You've already proven you can identify and eliminate the worst offenders. I'm giving you the authority to continue doing it, but with resources, intelligence, and legal backing. Frank absorbed this. What's the catch? You work under my authority. You investigate targets I designate. You submit reports. You follow inquisitorial protocols. And most importantly, Eisenhorn's voice dropped to a whisper. You never ever forget that the Imperium is the only thing standing between humanity and extinction. We can reform, we can improve, but we cannot fall. If your crusade ever threatens Imperial stability, I will execute you myself. Are we clear? Crystal. Frank stood, testing his repaired shoulder. The augmetic nerve stimulators worked perfectly, restoring full range of motion. So, who's first on your list? Commissar General Kreutz. Frank's eyebrows rose. The man who runs the entire sector's commissariat? The one who let me walk out of his council chamber? The same. Kreutz is the architect of the execution quota system. He's personally responsible for implementing policies that have killed thousands of Imperial soldiers. He's also politically connected, respected by senior command, and has survived 3 previous inquisitorial investigations. He's untouchable through normal channels, but not untouchable by an interrogator with a grudge and official sanction. Precisely. Eisenhorn handed Frank a new bolt pistol, craftsman quality, inscribed with inquisitorial seals. Your target is Commissar General Kreutz. Your mission is to investigate his implementation of execution quotas, gather evidence of systematic abuse, and if warranted, terminate with extreme prejudice. You have 72 hours. Frank checked the pistol's action, holstered it. And if he's not guilty, if he's just following doctrine like everyone else? Then you'll have learned an important lesson about the difference between systematic failure and individual corruption. But between you and me? Eisenhorn smiled without humor. Kreutz is guilty. He just hides it better than most. Find the evidence, make it undeniable, and show the Commissariat that no one is above accountability. A servitor approached with Frank's cleaned and repaired coat. Still a Commissar's coat, but now bearing subtle inquisitorial markings that identified him as an interrogator operating under direct authority. Frank put it on, feeling the weight of his new position settle across his shoulders like a yoke. "One more thing," Frank said. "Those files you promised, the ones about warp-touched assets pulled from other realities. I want them. You'll have them. Though I warn you, what you find may not bring the closure you're seeking. The Imperium has been experimenting with cross-dimensional extraction for centuries. You're not the first. You won't be the last. And the reasons we do it," Eisenhorn's expression darkened. "Let's just say the war against chaos requires weapons we're not proud of." Frank understood. He'd become one of those weapons, a killer from a reality where justice still meant something, transplanted into a galaxy where justice was just another word for authorized murder. They'd broken him, rebuilt him, aimed him at their own corruption, and convinced him it was his idea. The question was whether he could use their system against them, or whether he'd just become another tool in the Imperium's endless machinery of oppression. 72 hours to investigate Kreutz, Frank confirmed. "What resources do I have?" "Full access to inquisitorial intelligence networks, a team of operatives if you need them, authorization to interrogate any Imperial servant below the rank of Lord General, and my personal backing, which in this sector means you can kick down any door and shoot anyone who objects." Eisenhorn stood. "But Frank, be smart about this. Kreutz has powerful friends. Move too obviously, he'll see you coming. Move too slowly, he'll have time to destroy evidence. You need to be surgical, precise, the way you were before the Imperium scrambled your brain." "I remember how to hunt." Frank walked toward the door, then paused. "The soldiers I saved today, Delvain, Tyvan, the others, what happens to them?" "Nothing. They're protected under inquisitorial seal. Anyone who retaliates against them answers to me." "Good." Frank opened the door. "Because if I find out they were harmed because I couldn't protect them, our deal is off and I go back to hunting commissars my way." "Noted. Now go. Your target awaits." Frank walked out of the Medici facility into the compound's central plaza. Night had fallen fully now. Kratos Prime's toxic sky lit by the glow of industrial fires and the occasional screech of a cargo hauler making atmospheric descent. Soldiers moved through the darkness on patrol, their silhouettes sharp against the flames. They didn't know their entire command structure was under investigation, didn't know that one man with a grudge and an inquisitor's backing was about to tear their leadership apart. Frank pulled out the data slate Eisenhorn had given him, accessed the preliminary intelligence on Kreutz. Service record, commendations, known associates, residential location, daily routine. Everything an assassin would need to plan an operation. But Frank wasn't an assassin. He was an investigator now, which meant he couldn't just shoot Kreutz in the face and call it justice. He needed evidence, documentation, proof that would survive inquisitorial scrutiny and justify the execution of a Commissar General. Harder than just killing him, but more permanent. Frank checked his chronometer. 72 hours. 3 days to bring down the man responsible for institutionalizing the brutality that had killed thousands. 3 days to prove the system could police itself. 3 days to decide if he was really making a difference or just playing the Imperium's game with a different coat. The Punisher was hunting again, this time with official sanction. He wondered which version was more dangerous. Commissar General Kreutz lived in a fortified estate on the northern edge of Firebase Kratos Prime, a brutalist mansion of reinforced rockcrete and steel that spoke to decades of paranoia justified by survival. Frank observed it from a ruined observation post 2 kilometers distant, using magnoculars borrowed from the inquisitorial armory. Guards patrolled the perimeter, not regular guard infantry, but private security forces, veterans handpicked by Kreutz and loyal to him personally. Automated gun servitors tracked movement along the walls. Void shields shimmered faintly in the toxic rain, capable of deflecting everything up to light artillery. Kreutz hadn't survived 50 years as a commissar by being careless. "Full frontal assault is suicide," Agent Vex said from beside Frank. The inquisitorial operative had attached himself to Frank's investigation as liaison and support, which translated to making sure you don't go rogue again. He's got 40 guards, automated defenses, and probably a panic room that could withstand orbital bombardment. We'd need a full strike team and heavy weapons just to breach the perimeter. Good thing we're not breaching. Frank lowered the magnoculars. We're investigating, which means we need evidence, not corpses. What do we know about his routine? Vex pulled up a holo display from his data slate. Wakes at 0500, personal training regimen for 2 hours. Breakfast while reviewing execution reports from across the sector. 0800 to 1700, he's at sector command handling commissariat administration. Evening meal at his private club. Returns home by 2100. Sleeps with a bolt pistol under his pillow and a vox bead in his ear connected directly to his security chief. He ever leave the fortress without full security? Once a week, every Freitag he visits the Schola Progenium where he was trained, spends 3 hours there inspecting the new recruits, giving lectures on proper commissariat doctrine, goes alone except for a single bodyguard. Some tradition about commissars walking among cadets without the appearance of fear. Frank smiled without humor. Pride. That's his weakness. He's so convinced of his own authority, his own righteousness, that he can't imagine being vulnerable in a facility full of future commissars. When's the next visit? Tomorrow. 1400 hours. Perfect. That gives me tonight to do preliminary reconnaissance, tomorrow morning to set up, and tomorrow afternoon to have a conversation with the Commissar General about his policies. Frank started packing his equipment. I'll need access to the Scholar's layout, information on Kreutz's usual bodyguard, and a cover identity that lets me walk around without raising alarms. I can provide all of that, but Frank, Vex's expression was troubled. Eisenhorn said investigate, not assassinate. If you kill Kreutz without proof. I'm not killing him, yet. I'm interviewing him, asking questions about his execution quota system, reviewing his files. If he's innocent, I'll leave him alone. If he's guilty, Frank's hand drifted to his bolt pistol. Then I'll do what needs doing and let the evidence speak for itself. And if he refuses to answer your questions? Everyone answers questions eventually. It's just a matter of asking them the right way. The Schola Progenium occupied a converted fortress monastery on Firebase Kratos Prime's eastern plateau, a grey edifice of stone and steel where the Imperium's orphans were transformed into its most fanatical servants. Frank walked through its gates the next afternoon, wearing the robes of an ecclesiarchy inspector, his inquisitorial credentials hidden but ready if challenged. Vex had done good work with the cover identity, enough authenticity to pass casual inspection, not enough depth to survive serious scrutiny. Frank had 3 hours before Kreutz arrived. He used them to explore. The Scholar's archives were extensive, documenting centuries of cadets processed through its brutal curriculum. Frank accessed the records for graduates who'd become commissars under Kreutz's command, cross-referenced them with execution statistics, and found a pattern that made his blood run cold. Every commissar trained in the past 20 years showed dramatically increased execution rates compared to historical averages, not just by a little, by orders of magnitude. Commissars graduated in 980 M41 averaged 12 executions per year. Commissars graduated in 995 M41 after Kreutz became Commissar General and reformed the training curriculum, averaged 47 executions per year, 4 times as many. And the lesson was clear. Kreutz wasn't just enforcing brutal doctrine, he was teaching it. Every cadet who passed through this schola learned that a good commissar maintained high execution rates, that mercy was weakness, that soldiers were ammunition to be expended. Frank downloaded the files to his data slate, adding them to the growing body of evidence. But evidence alone wasn't enough. He needed Kreutz's own words, his own justification, recorded and undeniable. At 13:55 hours, Commissar General Kreutz arrived. Frank watched from a second-floor observation gallery as the old commissar entered the main hall, his augmetic eyes gleaming in the schola's dim lighting. His bodyguard, a scarred veteran with a plasma pistol and the cold efficiency of a professional killer, walked 3 paces behind, alert but not expecting threats in a facility full of loyal Imperial servants. Kreutz began his lecture to the assembled cadets, perhaps 200 young men and women who'd been raised from infancy to serve the Emperor without question or mercy. Frank listened to the speech, his jaw clenching with every word. "Compassion is the enemy of discipline," Kreutz's mechanically enhanced voice boomed. "You will encounter soldiers who beg for mercy, who plead for their families, who claim they were afraid, uncertain, weak. Your response must be immediate and absolute. Execute them, not because they are evil, but because mercy shown to one coward encourages 1,000 others. The Imperium requires brutality. It demands it, and you will be the instruments of that brutality." The cadets listened with the rapt attention of converts hearing gospel truth. Frank saw himself in their faces, or rather, the mind-wiped version of himself that had spent 6 months enthusiastically executing innocent soldiers because someone had told him it was necessary. He'd heard enough. Frank descended from the gallery, walked across the main hall floor with the measured pace of someone who belonged there. Kreutz noticed him mid-sentence, his augmetic eyes focusing with mechanical precision. "You there, Inspector. This is a closed lecture. Unless you have business, I have business." Frank pulled back his robes, revealing the inquisitorial seal on his bolt pistol. "Interrogator Castle, Ordo Hereticus. I'm here to discuss your implementation of execution quotas across the Kratos Prime sector." The hall went silent. 200 cadets stared. Kreutz's bodyguard reached for his plasma pistol, but Frank already had his bolt pistol aimed at the man's center mass. "Don't," Frank said quietly. "I'm here to talk, not kill. But if you make me kill you, I will. And then I'll talk to the Commissar General over your corpse. Your choice." The bodyguard looked to Kreutz for guidance. The Commissar General studied Frank with those inhuman augmetic eyes, calculating, assessing the threat. Finally, he raised a hand. "Stand down, Trosk. The interrogator has legitimate authority." Kreutz's gaze never left Frank, though I question the wisdom of interrupting a commissariat training lecture. These cadets need to understand their duties. They understand fine. They understand that a good commissar racks up a body count. They understand that execution statistics determine promotions. They understand exactly what you've taught them, that brutality is policy and mercy is treason. Frank walked closer, holstering his pistol but keeping his hand near it. What they don't understand is why. Why you implemented a system that encourages commissars to execute their own men. Why you created quotas that turn military discipline into state-sanctioned murder. Why you... Because IT works. Kreutz's voice thundered through his Vox implant, making the cadets flinch. The execution quota system has maintained discipline across 300 regiments. It has prevented mass desertions during 15 major campaigns. It has held the line when everything else failed. Results, interrogator. Results. That's what matters. Results. Frank pulled out his data slate, displayed the statistics he'd compiled. Your system has increased executions by 300%. Regimental morale has dropped by 40%. Desertion rates have doubled. You're not maintaining discipline. You're creating the conditions that require it. Soldiers aren't afraid of the enemy anymore. They're afraid of you, as they should be. Kreutz descended from the lecture platform, standing eye to eye with Frank despite the 20-year age difference and the augmetic enhancements that turned him partially into a machine. Fear is the only universal language. Fear of punishment, fear of death, fear of failing the Emperor. Without that fear, the Guard falls apart. Is that what you tell yourself? That the thousands of soldiers executed under your watch died for the greater good? That the medics, the Vox operators, the squadron leaders who made smart tactical calls deserved to die because they violated your quotas? Frank's voice was steel wrapped in ice. I've watched videos of myself executing those people. I know what it looks like when the system turns good soldiers into statistics, and I know what you are. What am I, interrogator? A true believer. The most dangerous kind. You actually think you're right. You've convinced yourself that brutality equals strength, that mercy equals weakness, that the only way to maintain order is through terror. You're not corrupt, you're something worse. You're competent, efficient, effective, and that makes you the perfect example of why this system needs to burn. Kreutz smiled, the expression terrible on his machine-enhanced face. Then burn it, interrogator. You have inquisitorial authority. Execute me right here. Show these cadets that authority can be challenged. Prove that the system can be fought. Do it. Frank's hand hovered over his pistol. Around them, 200 cadets watched, waiting to see if the interrogator would follow through, waiting to see if rebellion was possible. And Frank realized the trap. If he executed Kreutz here, without trial, without evidence presented formally, he'd be proving Kreutz's entire philosophy correct. He'd be demonstrating that might makes right, that authority answers only to superior authority, that the only response to brutality was greater brutality. He'd become exactly what he was fighting against. But if he didn't execute Kreutz, if he let the Commissar General walk away, he'd prove that the system protected its own. That investigation was meaningless. That evidence didn't matter when the accused had political power. There was no good choice, only less terrible ones. Frank lowered his hand from his pistol. No, he said quietly. I'm not executing you. I'm arresting you. Formal charges, systematic abuse of commissarial authority, implementing policies designed to increase executions beyond military necessity, and creating an institutional culture that prioritizes brutality over effectiveness. You'll answer those charges before an inquisitorial tribunal. You'll have the chance to defend yourself, to present evidence, to make your case. And when you're found guilty, and you will be found guilty, your execution will be legal, documented, and undeniable. Kreutz's smile widened. A tribunal. How civilized and how pointless. I've survived 3 inquisitorial investigations, interrogator. I have political allies, documented successes, and 50 years of loyal service. Your tribunal will take months to convene, years to conclude, and will ultimately find that I was following established doctrine. You cannot win this fight through official channels. The only way to stop me is to kill me, and you just proved you don't have the spine for it. Maybe. Frank pulled out binders, imperial restraints inscribed with inquisitorial seals. But I've got evidence, testimony, and an inquisitor who wants you gone. Let's see who wins that fight. He moved to restrain Kreutz. The Commissar General didn't resist, but his augmetic eyes burned with triumph. He knew something Frank didn't, had some card left to play. Frank was about to discover what it was. The card was political power, and it was played before Frank even got Kreutz out of the schola. 3 Valkyrie gunships descended on the training grounds with the roar of jet engines and the unmistakable authority of senior command. They disgorged 20 stormtroopers, not commissariat enforcers, but Lord General Militant Corvanus's personal guard, along with the Lord General himself, resplendent in full dress uniform and radiating the kind of fury that came from having his authority challenged. Stand down, interrogator. Corvanus was in his 60s, a career officer who'd risen through political connections rather than battlefield competence, and his face was red enough to suggest an imminent stroke. Release Commissar General Kreutz immediately. You are interfering with critical military operations during a time of war. Frank kept his grip on Kreutz's restraints. I'm conducting an inquisitorial investigation under the authority of Inquisitor Eisenhorn. Unless you outrank an Inquisitor, Lord General, I suggest you step back and let me do my job. Your job is destabilizing this entire sector. Corvanus gestured at the stormtroopers, who raised their hellguns. 20 weapons aimed at Frank's head. Commissar General Kreutz is responsible for maintaining discipline across 300 regiments. Without him, we face mass desertions, morale collapse, and potential rebellion. The Orc incursions on our eastern borders require absolute military cohesion. I will not allow one rogue interrogator to compromise our defensive posture. Convenient timing, Frank observed. The second I arrest Kreutz for systematic abuse, suddenly there's a crisis that requires his immediate release. Almost like someone called ahead and warned you this was coming. Kreutz's augmetic eyes gleamed. I serve the Imperium, interrogator. That includes maintaining appropriate communication channels with military command. Lord General Corvanus understands what you apparently don't, that this sector cannot afford your crusade. Frank looked at the 20 stormtroopers, their fingers on triggers, waiting for the order to fire. Looked at Corvanus, his face set in bureaucratic determination. Looked at the 200 scholar cadets watching this confrontation and learning the most important lesson the Imperium could teach. Authority protects authority, and challenging the system meant dying alone. He could fight, kill maybe 5 or 6 stormtroopers before the rest cut him down. Die proving that the Imperium's corruption was too deep to root out. Become a martyr that no one would remember because Corvanus would classify the entire incident and Kreutz would continue his policies for another decade. Or he could fold. Release Kreutz, let the system protect its own, and prove that investigation was meaningless when the accused had political connections. Neither option was acceptable. So Frank chose the third path. You're right, Lord General. Frank released Kreutz's restraints, stepped back with his hands visible. I apologize for the disruption. I was operating on incomplete intelligence. Clearly, Commissar General Kreutz's services are too valuable to interrupt during a crisis. Corvanus blinked, clearly not expecting compliance. Yes, exactly. I'm glad you see reason, interrogator. Now, if you'll just... However, Frank's voice hardened. Since the eastern border situation is so critical, I'm sure the Lord General won't mind if I personally observe Commissar General Kreutz's methods in action. After all, the best way to evaluate whether his policies are effective is to see them implemented under combat conditions. I'll attach myself to his staff for the duration of the crisis. Full access, full observation, complete documentation of his decision-making process. Kreutz's smile faltered. Corvanus's face went from red to purple. That's highly irregular. Commissariat operations are not subject to inquisitorial oversight. They are now. Frank pulled out his credentials, held them up for the stormtroopers to see. I have authority to investigate any Imperial servant, Lord General, including you. So either you let me observe Kreutz in the field, or I start investigating why you're so interested in protecting a Commissar General accused of systematic abuse. Your choice. The silence stretched. Stormtroopers looked to their commander. Corvanus looked to Kreutz. Kreutz stared at Frank with his augmetic eyes, calculating the angles, searching for the trap. Very well, Kreutz said finally. The interrogator may observe my operations. Perhaps when he sees the reality of maintaining discipline under combat conditions, he'll understand why my methods are necessary. Lord General, we should depart immediately. The Orcs won't wait for us to resolve internal politics. Agreed. Corvanus gestured to his stormtroopers. who lowered their weapons with visible relief. Interrogator Castle, you'll accompany us to forward operating base Hadrian. The 83rd, 107th and 501st Regiments are holding the eastern defensive line against an Orc war estimated at 50,000 strong. You'll have ample opportunity to observe Commissariat doctrine in action. Frank nodded, following as the group boarded the Valkyries. He caught Vex's eye. The inquisitorial agent had been watching from the Scholar's entrance, recording everything, and received a subtle nod of approval. This was what Eisenhorn had meant by being surgical. Frank hadn't gotten his arrest, but he'd gotten something better. Unrestricted access to Kreutz during the one time when the Commissar General's true nature would be impossible to hide. Combat stripped away pretense. In the field, under fire, with soldiers dying and decisions measured in seconds, Kreutz would show exactly what kind of leader he was. And Frank would be there to document every execution, every brutal order, every moment where the Commissar General chose terror over tactics. The Valkyrie lifted off, carrying them east toward the sound of distant artillery. Through the viewport, Frank could see the horizon lit by explosions, the telltale green traces of Orc weaponry stitching the sky. Somewhere out there, 3 regiments were holding the line against impossible odds. And soon, Frank would see whether Kreutz's system of brutality actually worked, or whether it was just institutional murder with a military justification. Forward operating base Hadrian was chaos contained by rockcrete and razor wire. Frank arrived to find the command bunker filled with officers shouting over vox static, tactical displays showing Orc positions advancing on 3 fronts, and the pervasive smell of fear and recaf. The 83rd, 107th and 501st had been holding for 6 days against an Orc war that should have overrun them in 2. They were winning, barely, at tremendous cost. Commissar General Kreutz entered the command bunker and immediately began reviewing execution reports. Not casualty reports, not tactical assessments, execution reports. The 83rd executed 7 soldiers yesterday for cowardice, Kreutz said, scanning his data slate. Below acceptable quota, the 107th executed 3 for desertion, also below quota. The 501st executed 12 for various infractions, acceptable but not optimal. He looked at the regimental commanders assembled in the bunker. Gentlemen, your men are fighting well, but your discipline is slipping. Increase enforcement or face replacement. Colonel Brennis of the 107th, the same officer who'd sent Frank to stop Drakov, spoke carefully. Sir, with respect, our casualties are already at 60%. If we execute more soldiers for minor infractions, then the remaining 40% will fight harder to avoid the same fate. Kreutz's augmetic eyes fixed on Brennis. Your regiment has a reputation for leniency, Colonel. I've reviewed your records. Too few executions, too much tolerance for weakness. That ends now. By this time tomorrow, I expect to see improved statistics, or I'll find a commander who understands what discipline means. Frank watched from the corner of the bunker, his recorder active, documenting everything. This was it. This was the moment that would damn Kreutz more effectively than any arrest. The Commissar General wasn't evaluating military effectiveness. He was evaluating execution quotas. He cared more about how many soldiers were killed by their own side than how many were killed by the enemy. Commissar General, Frank said quietly, the 107th has held their section of the line for 6 days against overwhelming odds. Their casualty rate is lower than the other regiments despite facing heavier Orc assault. By any objective measure, they're the most effective unit in this engagement. Why do you care more about their execution statistics than their combat performance? Kreutz turned to face him, and in that moment Frank saw the truth behind the augmetic eyes. This wasn't about military effectiveness. This wasn't about maintaining discipline. This was about control, about proving that Kreutz's authority was absolute, that his policies were correct, that questioning him was tantamount to heresy. Because, interrogator, combat performance is temporary. Today's heroes are tomorrow's cowards if they're not properly motivated. Discipline is the constant that maintains fighting effectiveness across years, across campaigns, across the inevitable moments when courage fails. The 107th fights well now, but without proper enforcement, they'll break. And when they break, they'll take 3 other regiments with them through the example of their failure. Or, Frank countered, they'll fight better because their commander trusts them, because they're not fighting from fear of execution, but from genuine loyalty and tactical competence. The 107th's low casualty rate suggests their commander makes good decisions. Maybe that's worth more than high execution statistics. An interesting theory. Kreutz smiled without warmth. Let's test it. Colonel Brennus, you have 48 hours to increase your regiment's execution rate to acceptable levels. Fail, and I'll execute you personally for dereliction of duty. Then I'll install a commander who understands that a commissar's primary weapon is fear, not friendship. Brennus's face went pale. Sir, Yes, sir. Frank's hand drifted to his bolt pistol. This was it, the line. Kreutz was threatening to execute a competent commander for refusing to murder his own soldiers at quota. This was the evidence Frank needed, recorded and undeniable. But if he acted now, if he drew on Kreutz in a command bunker surrounded by loyal officers and stormtroopers, he'd die, and his evidence would die with him. Sometimes the hardest part of being the Punisher wasn't pulling the trigger. It was knowing when not to. Commissar General, Frank said slowly, I'd like to accompany the 107th on their next patrol. Observe their operations firsthand. See whether Colonel Brennus's approach actually compromises effectiveness or whether it's a viable alternative to traditional commissariat doctrine. Kreutz studied him, clearly looking for the trap. Very well. The 107th is scheduled for a reconnaissance in force at Oro 600 tomorrow. You may accompany them. Perhaps watching good soldiers die because their commander is too soft to enforce proper discipline will educate you about the realities of war. Perhaps. Frank nodded to Brennus. Colonel, I'll report to your position at 0530 for briefing. He left the command bunker before Kreutz could change his mind, before the rage building in his chest could override his tactical judgment. Outside, under the toxic sky lit by artillery flashes, Frank found a quiet corner and activated his Vox link to Eisenhorn. I've got him, Frank said quietly, on recording, threatening to execute a competent commander for not meeting execution quotas, prioritizing statistics over effectiveness. It's exactly what we needed. Excellent, Eisenhorn's voice crackled with static. But Frank, be careful. Kreutz is trying to get you killed. That reconnaissance tomorrow. I've reviewed the tactical plans. The 107th is being sent into an Orc-held sector with insufficient support. It's a suicide mission designed to prove his point, that commanders who don't execute enough soldiers get their men killed. Then I'll make sure they don't get killed. Frank checked his bolt pistol, his ammunition, his combat knife. And when we come back alive, Kreutz's theory dies with his credibility. Or you die and become a footnote in his service record. Watch yourself out there. The Vox clicked off. Frank stood in the darkness, listening to the distant sound of orcs screaming their eternal wah, and wondered if he'd finally found the battle that would kill him. But first, he had a regiment to save. The 107th Cadian Regiment assembled in the pre-dawn darkness, 300 soldiers checking weapons and whispering prayers to a god emperor most of them had never seen and probably didn't believe in. Frank moved among them, studying faces. These weren't the broken men he'd seen in other regiments. No 1,000-yard stares, no nervous tics, no desperate fatalism. They looked like professionals preparing for a dangerous job, confident in their training and their leadership. Colonel Brennus found Frank near the assembly point. Interrogator, you don't have to do this. If you stay back at the command bunker, then I don't see what actually happens when a commander trusts his troops instead of terrorizing them. Frank checked his bolt pistol one final time. Besides, Kreutz set this up to get me killed. I'd hate to disappoint him by surviving in safety. Brennus almost smiled. You know it's a trap then. I know Kreutz is sending you into an orc-held industrial sector with minimal support and expecting you to either die proving his point or execute enough soldiers to meet his quota. What I don't know is how you plan to handle it. The same way I've handled every mission for the past 2 years. Brennus pulled out a tactical map, showed Frank the route. Intelligence says there's an orc supply depot in Sector 7 Gamma. We're supposed to recon it, assess defenses, report back. Standard mission. Except 7 Gamma was an Imperial ammunition plant before the orcs took it, which means it's got underground bunkers, multiple access points, and enough defensive positions that a competent orc commander could hold it against a full company with just a mob of boys. Brennus traced alternative routes on the map. Kreutz knows this. He's sending us in undermanned and expecting catastrophic casualties. When we come back decimated, he'll blame my insufficient discipline and use it to justify his quotas. So we don't come back decimated. Frank studied the map, his tactical mind, built on Earth's urban warfare and refined by 6 months of stolen memories, analyzing angles. What if we don't recon the depot at all? What if we hit something else somewhere Kreutz doesn't expect and come back with an actual victory? That's disobeying direct orders. Disobeying suicidal orders given by a corrupt Commissar General who wants you dead. There's a difference. Frank pointed to a location on the map. What's this? Sector 8 Delta, Industrial Water Treatment Facility. The orcs have been using it to supply their forces with drinkable water. Emperor knows they're not picky, but even orcs need hydration. If we take it out... Brennus's eyes widened. We cut off water to 3 orc war camps, force them to either retreat or advance without proper supply lines. And we do it with minimal casualties because water treatment facilities aren't heavily defended. Orcs don't guard infrastructure the way humans do. They guard the shiny stuff, the weapons, the loot. A water plant is boring, which makes it perfect. Frank looked at Brennus. Your call, Colonel. Follow Kreutz's suicide order or actually accomplish something. Brennus stared at the map for a long moment. Frank could see the calculation happening behind his eyes, weighing duty against survival, orders against effectiveness, fear of Kreutz against responsibility to his soldiers. We hit the water plant, Brennus said finally. And when Kreutz asks why we deviated from orders, I'll tell him we saw an opportunity and took it. He can execute me if he wants. At least my men will be alive to remember I tried. Frank clapped him on the shoulder. That's the spirit. Now let's go ruin Kreutz's day. The approach to Sector 8 Delta took 4 hours through ruins that still smoked from previous battles. The 107th moved with professional silence, hand signals instead of vox chatter, scouts ranging ahead to identify threats before the main body stumbled into them. Frank watched their discipline, their coordination, and understood why they had lower casualty rates than other regiments. This wasn't luck. This was training and trust. They reached the water treatment facility at 0847 hours. Frank had been right. The orcs had posted minimal guards. Maybe 20 boys lounging around the perimeter, more interested in fighting each other than watching for Imperial assault. Inside the facility, Frank could hear the rumble of machinery, the industrial processing that kept an entire orc supply line functioning. 2 squads on the perimeter, Brennus ordered via Vox. Suppress the guards quietly if possible. 3rd and 4th squads with me. We're planting demo charges on the processing equipment. 5th squad holds the rally point. We're in and out in 15 minutes. The assault was textbook. 1st and 2nd squads moved on the orc guards with laser guns set to focused beam. Quiet kills, minimal noise. Most of the orcs died before they realized they were under attack. The few who managed to scream brought more boys running from inside the facility, but they ran straight into overlapping fields of fire from disciplined guardsmen who didn't panic, didn't break formation, didn't need a commissar threatening them to hold their ground. Frank fought alongside 3rd Squad, his bolt pistol making wet sounds as explosive rounds tore through orc flesh. These weren't the massive knobs he'd fought before, just standard boys, dangerous in groups but manageable with proper tactics. He dropped 3 in quick succession, each shot placed with the precision of someone who'd spent a lifetime making kills count. A big orc, probably a knob in training, charged him with a chopper raised high. Frank sidestepped the swing, grabbed the orc's wrist, used its own momentum to send it stumbling past him. He put a bolt round through its spine while it was off balance. The orc went down, twitching. "Charge is set!" someone shouted from inside the facility. 30-second fuse! Pull back! Brennus's voice carried over the vox. "Rally point, now!" The 107th withdrew with the same discipline they'd shown advancing. No panic, no rout, just professional soldiers executing a tactical retreat under fire. Frank covered their withdrawal, dropping orcs who got too close, his bolt pistol running hot from sustained fire. They made it 200 meters before the charges detonated. The water treatment facility went up in a fireball that could probably be seen from orbit. Secondary explosions, Promethium storage tanks, ammunition the orcs had been hoarding, Emperor knew what, turned the entire complex into a miniature sun. The shockwave knocked Frank off his feet. He rolled with it, came up firing at orcs who'd been pursuing and were now stumbling in confusion. "Head count," Brennus demanded. "Sound off by squad." The responses came in quickly. 1st Squad, all present. 2nd Squad, 1 wounded, non-critical. 3rd Squad, all present. 4th Squad, 2 wounded, 1 critical. 5th Squad, all present. Out of 300 soldiers sent on a suicide mission, they'd taken 3 casualties. 3. And they'd destroyed a critical piece of orc infrastructure that would force the enemy to restructure their entire supply line. Frank found himself grinning. This was what the Imperial Guard could be when led by commanders who gave a damn. Not cannon fodder, not meat for the grinder. Actual soldiers accomplishing actual objectives. "Back to base," Brennus ordered. "Double time, but stay sharp. The orcs are going to be pissed." They were. The 107th fought 3 running skirmishes on the way back to forward operating base Hadrian, but each time Brennus's tactics and his soldiers' discipline carried them through with minimal losses. By the time they reached the base perimeter at 13:20 hours, total casualties stood at 7 wounded, 0 dead, a suicide mission with 0 fatalities. Commissar General Kreutz was waiting at the command bunker entrance, his augmetic eyes burning with barely contained fury. "Colonel Brennus, your orders were to reconnoiter Sector 7 Gamma. Instead, you attacked a water treatment facility in Sector 8 Delta. You deviated from direct orders. You compromised operational security. You accomplished the mission's objective," Frank interrupted, stepping forward. Colonel Brennus was ordered to gather intelligence on orc logistics. He determined that the water treatment facility represented a more valuable target than the ammunition depot. He was correct. The facility's destruction will force 3 orc war camps to relocate or advance without proper supply lines. Tactical victory achieved with minimal casualties. By any rational assessment, this mission was a success. He disobeyed orders. Kreutz's Vox implant made his voice shake the walls. The chain of command exists for a reason. When commanders start making their own decisions about which orders to follow, then they're being commanders instead of executioners. Frank pulled out his data slate, showed Kreutz the recordings. "I've documented everything, Commissar General. The mission briefing that constituted a suicide order, the tactical deviation that saved lives while achieving objectives, the professional execution that proves soldiers can be effective without terror-based discipline. This is evidence that your system doesn't work, that there's a better way." "There is no better way." Kreutz stepped closer, his augmetic face twisted with something that might have been rage or might have been fear. "You think one successful mission proves anything? I've overseen thousands of operations across 50 years. I've seen what happens when discipline breaks down. I've watched regiments collapse because commanders were too weak to do what was necessary. The 107th's success today is an anomaly. Give them a month, they'll be running from orcs and begging for mercy because their commander taught them to think instead of obey. Then let's make it a long-term study. Frank met Kreutz's eyes without flinching. Give Colonel Brennus 6 months. Let him run his regiment his way. If his casualty rates exceed yours, if his effectiveness drops, if his soldiers start deserting or breaking, you win. Your system is validated. But if he succeeds, if his men fight better without execution quotas, Frank smiled without humor. Then maybe it's time to admit your 50 years of service have been built on a lie. Silence fell over the command bunker. Every officer present was staring at Kreutz, waiting to see how the Commissar General would respond to this direct challenge to his authority. Kreutz's augmetic eyes flickered, processing, calculating. Finally, 6 months. But when, not if, when, the 107th fails, I will personally execute Colonel Brennus for dereliction of duty, and you, interrogator, will witness that execution and admit you were wrong. Agreed? Agreed. Frank extended his hand. And when Brennus succeeds, you'll submit to inquisitorial investigation without resistance. Deal? Kreutz stared at Frank's hand like it was a venomous serpent. Then, slowly, he reached out and shook it. Deal, the Commissar General said. Emperor, help you when you lose. Frank didn't answer. He just turned and walked out of the command bunker, his recorder still active, still documenting everything. He had 6 months to prove that the Imperium's brutal system could be reformed. 6 months to show that soldiers fought better from trust than terror. 6 months to be right or die trying. Behind him, he heard Brennus quietly exhale. The colonel had just been given a death sentence with a timer attached. Either he succeeded beyond all reasonable expectations, or Kreutz would execute him and use the failure to justify another 50 years of brutality. No pressure. The 6 months that followed became legend. Colonel Brennus and the 107th Cadian Regiment fought across Kratos Prime's Eastern Theater with the kind of tactical brilliance that made other commanders take notes and commissars grind their teeth in frustration. They held defensive positions that should have collapsed. They executed ambushes that decimated Orc supply lines. They rescued 3 other regiments from encirclement and did it with casualty rates half what Imperial doctrine predicted. Frank watched it all, documented it all, recorded every mission, every decision, every moment where Brennus chose tactics over terror and proved that soldiers could be effective without living in fear of execution. But warfare in the 41st millennium had a way of testing even the best theories. The test came on day 173 when the Orcs launched their final offensive. The War hit forward operating base Hadrian at dawn with the force of a tidal wave made of green skin and violence. 50,000 Orcs, maybe more, maybe twice that, came screaming across the wasteland in a tide of bodies that blotted out the horizon. War bosses riding in battle wagons, deaf dreads stomping through rubble, storm boys rocketing overhead. The full fury of an Orc horde that had been building momentum for 6 months and was ready to break the Imperial line once and for all. The 83rd, 107th, and 501st Regiments held the forward positions, 900 soldiers against an army. Frank stood on the firebase's walls beside Brennus, watching the green tide approach through magnoculars. That's not 50,000, that's closer to 100,000. I know. Brennus checked his laser gun, his voice calm despite the apocalypse bearing down on them. Intelligence underestimated their consolidation. They've been gathering warbands from across 3 sectors. This isn't a raid anymore. This is a full war, and we're the only thing between them and the capital. Reinforcements? 48 hours out. Lord General Corvanus is scrambling reserves, but they won't arrive in time. We hold for 2 days, or the entire sector falls. Brennus looked at Frank. This is what Kreutz has been waiting for. The moment where my soft tactics fail and his brutal discipline proves necessary. He's probably in the command bunker right now, preparing his "I told you so" speech. Frank smiled grimly. Then let's make sure he doesn't get to give it. What's the plan? Survive. Brennus pointed at the defensive positions. We've got the walls, automated defenses, artillery support for the first 6 hours before ammunition runs critical. After that, it's laser guns and faith. The 83rd holds the north wall, the 501st holds the south. My 107th has the east, where the main assault will hit. You're putting yourself in the hardest position. I'm putting my men where they'll fight best. They trust me. They know I won't waste their lives. That trust is worth more than any execution quota. Brennus chambered around in his laser gun. Besides, if we're going to prove that soldiers fight better without terror, we need to prove it where it matters most. The orc tide crashed against the walls. The opening phase was pure chaos. Artillery hammered the leading orc formations, turning the approach into a killing field of craters and burning wreckage. Automated gun servitors tracked and fired with mechanical precision. Heavy bolters stitched lines of explosive death through the mob. For 10 glorious minutes, it looked like the defenses might actually hold. Then the orcs reached the walls. They came in a screaming wave of choppers and shooters and raw biological aggression. They climbed over their own dead, used corpses as ladders, threw grappling hooks and chains and each other at the fortifications. The first orc over the east wall took 3 las rounds to the chest before dying. The second took 5. The third didn't die at all, just kept coming until someone shoved a bayonet through its eye socket. Frank fought beside the 107th, his bolt pistol barking death with each trigger pull. 1 orc, 2, 3, 4, each shot precise, each kill necessary, no ammunition wasted on suppressive fire or panic shooting. Around him, the 107th fought with the same disciplined fury, laser gun volleys coordinated, no breaking formation, no running. They were holding. "Second wave!" someone shouted. The second wave was worse. Orc knobs, bigger, stronger, meaner, led fresh mobs against the weakened defenders. They hit the north wall, where the 83rd was already buckling under pressure. Frank heard the Vox chatter, heard the 83rd's commanders calling for support, for reinforcements, for anything. And then he heard something that made his blood freeze. Commissar General Kreutz's voice over the command frequency. 83rd Regiment, hold your positions. Any soldier who retreats will be executed. Any squad that falls back will be decimated. You will die at your posts or die by my hand. There is no alternative. The 83rd tried. Emperor, they tried. But they were outnumbered 5-1, exhausted, watching their brothers die. And the only motivation their commissars gave them was the threat of execution. When the orcs broke through their lines, inevitably, predictably, the 83rd didn't fall back in good order. They routed. Terror of the orcs and terror of their own commissars combined into pure panic, and 300 soldiers broke and ran. Into commissariat, blocking forces. Into commissars with bolt pistols raised. Into a massacre. Frank watched from the east wall as commissar after commissar executed fleeing soldiers. Not enemy combatants, not traitors, just terrified men who'd been pushed past their breaking point and chose survival over suicide. The commissars cut them down systematically, efficiently, turning retreat into slaughter. 47 soldiers executed by their own side before the survivors rallied. 47. And the north wall fell anyway. "Fall back to secondary positions!" Brennus's voice cut through the Vox static. "All regiments, phased withdrawal, cover each other, do not panic!" The 107th pulled back with the discipline they'd shown in every engagement. No rout, no mass desertion. Just professional soldiers executing a tactical withdrawal while maintaining fire discipline and unit cohesion. They lost men. Of course, they lost men. This was war. But they lost them fighting, not fleeing, not executed by commissars who valued statistics over lives. Frank covered the retreat, his bolt pistol running dangerously low on ammunition. An orc charged him. He shot it in the knee, let it fall, stomped its skull while pivoting to shoot another. A knob came at him with a power claw. Frank dodged the first swing, couldn't dodge the second, took a glancing blow that crumpled his armor and sent him flying. He hit the rockcrete hard enough to crack ribs. The knob advanced, power claw raised for a killing blow. Colonel Brennus shot it in the back. 3 laser-gun rounds, focused beam, burning through the knob's spine. It fell. Brennus grabbed Frank, hauled him upright. "You good?" "Broken ribs, maybe internal bleeding. I'll live." Frank forced himself to keep moving. "We need to..." The Vox exploded with screaming. The 501st Southern positions were collapsing. Orcs were breaking through everywhere. The firebase was being overrun. "All units, this is Lord General Corvinus." The Vox transmission was weak, distorted. "Reinforcements are still 36 hours out. You must hold. Commissar General Kreutz has assumed direct command of all commissariat forces. He will maintain discipline by any means necessary. Fight or die. Those are your only options." Frank and Brennus locked eyes. They both understood what that meant. Kreutz had just been given absolute authority to execute anyone he deemed insufficiently motivated. The 83rd had already learned what that looked like. Now it was the 107th's turn. The defense collapsed into street fighting as orcs pushed into forward operating base Hadrian's interior. The 107th fell back through the base's maze of bunkers and supply depots, fighting at every corner, making the orcs pay for every meter. Frank stayed with them, his bolt pistol down to 2 magazines, his body held together by adrenaline and augmetic nerve stimulators that screamed warnings about tissue damage and blood loss. They regrouped in a defensive position around the command bunker. 200 soldiers remaining from the original 300, exhausted, wounded, but still fighting. Commissar General Kreutz emerged from the command bunker, flanked by 6 commissars and 24 stormtroopers. His augmetic eyes swept across the assembled survivors, calculating, assessing, judging. "The 107th Cadian Regiment has withdrawn from 4 defensive positions in 6 hours, Kreutz announced, his Vox implant turning his voice into mechanical judgment. "This constitutes mass cowardice. Imperial doctrine is clear. Decimation. Decimation, the ancient punishment. Execute 1 in every 10 soldiers to terrify the rest into fighting harder." "No." Frank stepped forward, placing himself between Kreutz and the 107th. These men executed a tactical withdrawal under impossible odds. They maintained unit cohesion. They inflicted maximum casualties on the enemy while minimizing their own losses. They did everything right. They retreated. Kreutz's augmetic eyes burned. 4 times, each retreat encouraging more cowardice, more weakness. The 83rd broke because they saw the 107th falling back. The 501st is wavering because they believe retreat is acceptable. This rot stops now. 20 soldiers will be executed. The rest will learn that the only acceptable direction is forward. You execute 20 soldiers. You lose 20 soldiers who could still fight. Frank's hand drifted to his bolt pistol. You want to inspire the 107th? Give them a target worth dying for. Give them leadership that actually values their lives. Give them something besides fear. Fear is all that works. Kreutz drew his bolt pistol. I have proven this across 50 years. I have held regiments together through terror when everything else failed, and I will not allow your idealistic nonsense to compromise Imperial military doctrine. He pointed the pistol at Colonel Brennus. Starting with you, Colonel. Your soft tactics have infected this entire sector. Your execution... Frank drew faster. His bolt round took Kreutz's gun hand off at the wrist. The Commissar General's pistol, still clutched in his severed hand, clattered to the rockcrete. Kreutz screamed, clutched his stump, stared at Frank with augmetic eyes that finally showed something besides cold calculation. They showed fear. New plan, Frank said, his bolt pistol aimed at Kreutz's head. The 107th fights because they choose to fight, because their commander earned their loyalty, because they're defending their brothers, not fleeing a commissar's pistol. You want to prove your system works? Grab a laser gun and join them on the line. Show them that commissars can lead from the front instead of shooting people in the back. Kreutz's remaining hand scrabbled for a weapon. Frank shot him in the knee. The commissar general went down screaming. Or you can lie there and bleed out while soldiers you threaten do the job you were too busy executing people to do yourself. The other commissars raised their pistols. So did the stormtroopers. 26 weapons aimed at Frank. Behind him, 200 soldiers from the 107th raised their laser guns, aimed at the commissars. Stand down, Colonel Brennis said quietly. All of you. Commissar General Kreutz was about to execute 20 soldiers for tactical competence. Interrogator Castle stopped him. We can kill each other here, or we can kill orcs. Choose. For a moment, the standoff held. Then the orcs made the choice for them. A death dread crashed through the perimeter wall, its massive metal body bristling with weapons. Behind it, a fresh mob of orcs poured into the compound, screaming their eternal war. Every weapon swung toward the real enemy. Hold the line, Brennis roared. The 107th charged to meet them, not from fear, not from threats, from loyalty to their commander and each other, from the understanding that this was the moment where they proved everything Frank and Brennis had been arguing for 6 months. Frank joined them, his bolt pistol firing until it clicked empty. Then he drew his combat knife and went to work. This was the stand. This was where they'd proved that soldiers could fight better without terror, or die trying. The Battle of Forward Operating Base Hadrian lasted 32 hours. When it was over, the orcs had been driven back, reinforcements had arrived, and the sector was saved. The cost had been brutal. The 83rd reduced to 73 survivors, the 501st to 91, and the 107th, the regiment that had been threatened with decimation for tactical competence, had 147 soldiers still standing, more than both other regiments combined. Frank stood in the ruins of the firebase, surrounded by orc corpses and spent shell casings, watching the sun rise over a battlefield painted red with blood from a dozen different species. His body was a symphony of pain, broken ribs, internal bleeding, wounds that should have killed him hours ago, but hadn't, because there simply hadn't been time to die. He'd kept fighting because the alternative was letting Kreutz's vision of the Imperium win. Commissar General Kreutz had survived. Barely. Medicae had stabilized him, regrown his hand with expensive augmetics, patched his knee with industrial-grade replacements. He sat now in the command bunker, surrounded by inquisitorial agents, waiting for his tribunal. Inquisitor Eisenhorn had arrived with the reinforcements. He found Frank in the rubble, offered him a flask of Amasec. "You look like hell," Eisenhorn observed. "Feel worse." Frank took a drink, felt the liquor burn down his throat. But we held. The 107th held. Brennis held. Without decimation, without execution quotas, without Kreutz's terror tactics. "I know. I've reviewed the battle recordings." Eisenhorn sat beside Frank on a chunk of broken wall. The 107th's performance was extraordinary. Lower casualties than the other regiments despite holding the hardest position, better cohesion under pressure, faster adaptation to changing tactical situations. By every measurable metric, your theory was correct. Soldiers fight better from trust than terror. So Kreutz's tribunal will find him guilty of implementing systematic abuse of commissarial authority. He'll be stripped of rank, executed, and his execution quota policies will be officially condemned as counterproductive to imperial military effectiveness. Eisenhorn took back the flask, drank. "You won, Frank. You proved the system could be better. You reformed the commissariat in this sector. Congratulations. Frank waited for the other boot to drop. It took 3 seconds. However, Eisenhorn continued, we have a problem. Word of your crusade has spread beyond Kratos Prime. Across this subsector, soldiers are questioning their commissars. Officers are pushing back against execution quotas. Commissars themselves are debating whether their training was corrupted by Kreutz's influence. You've inspired exactly the kind of systemic questioning that threatens imperial stability. Questioning corrupt authority threatens stability? When that authority is the only thing holding 10 billion soldiers together across 1 million light years, yes. Eisenhorn's grey eyes were tired. You were right about Kreutz. You were right about the execution quotas. But Frank, the Imperium can't scale your solution. You succeeded because you personally led the 107th, personally vetted their commander, personally ensured their tactics were sound. That works for 1 regiment. It doesn't work for 10 million. So what are you saying? I'm saying the Inquisition is offering you a choice. Eisenhorn pulled out a data slate, showed Frank a document marked with enough seals to condemn a planet. Option 1. You accept a permanent position as interrogator with specific authority over commissariat reform. You'll travel the Imperium, investigating corrupt commissars, training better ones, slowly reforming the system from within. It'll take decades, centuries maybe, but it's real change. And option 2, you resign, quietly. Officially, you'll be transferred to a different sector for specialized duties. Unofficially, you disappear. The Inquisition provides you with a ship, supplies, and complete autonomy. You go wherever you want, do whatever you want, and never speak publicly about what happened here. In exchange, we suppress your recordings, classify this incident, and ensure that your crusade dies with Kreutz. Frank stared at the data slate. You're asking me to choose between being controlled or being silenced. I'm asking you to choose between slow change that might actually work or becoming a martyr whose legacy gets erased. Eisenhorn's voice was gentle. Frank, you can't fix the Imperium by yourself. It's too big, too old, too broken. But you can fix pieces of it. Small pieces, 1 regiment at a time, 1 commissar at a time. That's option 1. Or you can walk away, live free, and let someone else fight this fight. That's option 2. Both are valid choices. What about option 3? Frank met Eisenhorn's eyes. The one where I keep doing what I'm doing, but with inquisitorial backing. Hunt corrupt commissars, expose systematic abuse, build a network of commanders like Brennus who prove there's a better way. That is option 1, just with more honesty about the constraints. Eisenhorn stood, offered Frank a hand up. You'll have authority, resources, legal backing, but you'll also have oversight. The Inquisition doesn't give unlimited power to anyone, not even to people trying to reform corruption. You'll answer to me. You'll submit reports. You'll follow protocol. And most importantly, you'll accept that some battles can't be won, only managed. Frank took the offered hand, let Eisenhorn pull him upright. His ribs screamed. His augmetic nerve stimulators warned about imminent system failure. His body was telling him to stop, to rest, to let someone else carry the burden. But Frank Castle had never been good at letting other people fight his battles. I'll take option 1, Frank said, with conditions. Name them. Full access to all inquisitorial files on cross-dimensional extraction. You said I wasn't the first person pulled from another reality. I want to know who else, why, and what happened to them. Granted. Next. Protection for Colonel Brennus and the 107th. They proved my theory correct. If anyone retaliates against them for that, they'll answer to the Inquisition. Already done. Brennus is being promoted to general. The 107th will become a training regiment, teaching other units their tactics. Your legacy will be embedded in Imperial doctrine, properly. And finally, Frank looked at the ruins of the firebase, at the bodies being processed by corpse detail servitors. at the survivors who'd fought and bled and proven that soldiers could be more than ammunition. I want to find the Inquisitor who pulled me from Earth, who scrambled my brain, who turned me into a murder machine and aimed me at innocent people. I want answers, and I want accountability. Eisenhorn's expression darkened. That's complicated. The Inquisitor responsible operates in a different subsector. His authority rivals mine, and his experiments with cross-dimensional assets are officially sanctioned at the highest levels. Going after him means challenging policies that date back to the Great Crusade. I don't care how complicated it is. Someone ripped me from my reality, erased my memories, and made me kill people who didn't deserve it. That's a crime, and criminals deserve punishment. Frank's hand found his bolt pistol, thumb running over the inquisitorial seal. You said I'd have authority to hunt corrupt Imperial servants. Does that authority include corrupt inquisitors? Technically, yes. Practically. Eisenhorn smiled without humor. You'd be starting a war within the Inquisition itself, the kind of war that destroys careers, burns worlds, and usually ends with everyone involved dead or worse. Are you sure you want that fight? Frank thought about the Medici he'd executed for saving lives, the Vox operator who'd died calling for civilian evacuation, the squadron leader who'd made smart tactical calls. 2,000 names, 2,000 ghosts demanding justice. I'm sure, Frank said quietly, someone has to punish the guilty, even if the guilty wear the same uniform I do. Then welcome to the Ordo Hereticus, Interrogator Castle. Eisenhorn extended his hand formally. May the Emperor protect you, because what you're about to attempt will make enemies powerful enough to erase your existence. They shook. The deal was made. Frank Castle, the Punisher from Earth, was now officially an agent of the Imperium he'd spent the past 6 months fighting against. The irony wasn't lost on him. But irony didn't matter. Justice mattered. Accountability mattered. Making sure that the system that had broken him couldn't break anyone else. One more thing, Frank said. The penal legions. Kreutz mentioned them during our first confrontation. Soldiers condemned to death who get sent on suicide missions. What happens to them now? Same as always. They fight until they die. Why? Frank smiled. The same smile that had terrified criminals on Earth and corrupt commissars in the 41st millennium. Because I want them. Every penal legion in the sector. I want to turn them into what the 107th became. Soldiers who fight from purpose instead of fear. Redemption instead of terror. If I'm going to reform the Commissariat, I'm starting with the people everyone else threw away. Eisenhorn stared at him, then, slowly, began to laugh. You're insane. You know that? Been called worse. The penal legions are the Imperium's dumping ground for deserters, cowards, and criminals. They're cannon fodder, disposable, using them as proof of concept for Commissariat reform. Is exactly the kind of challenge that'll prove whether my theory actually works, or if I just got lucky with the 107th. Frank started walking toward the command bunker, his body protesting every step. Besides, if I can turn condemned criminals into effective soldiers, imagine what that says about the entire Commissariat's approach to discipline. It says you're either brilliant or suicidal. Eisenhorn fell into step beside him, possibly both. They walked together through the ruins, an inquisitor and his newest interrogator, planning the slow, grinding work of reforming an institution that had spent 10,000 years perfecting brutality. It wouldn't be easy, it wouldn't be quick, and it probably wouldn't even work. But Frank Castle had spent his entire life fighting battles everyone said were unwinnable. He'd fought crime on Earth despite a justice system that protected the guilty. He'd fought corruption in the Commissariat despite an authority structure that rewarded brutality. And now he'd fight the Inquisition itself to make sure no one else got mind-wiped and weaponized the way he had. In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, There was only war, but there was also justice. You just had to be willing to bleed for it. The 13th Penal Legion arrived at Forward Operating Base Hadrian 3 weeks after the Orc siege broke. 10,000 condemned men and women, shipped in bulk transport like ammunition, expected to die on whatever suicide mission command deemed appropriate. They shambled off the transports in chains, their prison uniforms marked with the skull and bars of imperial condemnation, their faces bearing the hollow expressions of people already dead who just hadn't stopped moving yet. Frank Castle stood on the landing platform, watching them assemble. Deserters, cowards, soldiers who'd cracked under pressure and run, criminals who'd stolen rations or struck an officer or committed any of 1,000 minor infractions that warranted death in the Imperium's eyes. The dregs, the broken, the condemned, his army. Colonel Brennus, now General Brennus, newly promoted and wearing his rank with uncomfortable pride, stood beside Frank. "You're sure about this?" The 107th succeeded because they were already good soldiers with strong leadership. The Penal Legions are different. Half of them probably deserve to be here. The other half are just victims of the same brutal system you've been fighting. "I know." Frank descended the ramp toward the assembled prisoners. "Which is why they're perfect. If I can turn them into effective soldiers, I prove that the Commissariat's entire approach to discipline is backwards. That redemption works better than terror. That even people the Imperium threw away can be valuable if someone gives them a chance. And if you can't?" Frank smiled grimly. "Then I die alongside them on whatever nightmare mission the Inquisition assigns us next. And history records that Interrogator Castle's reforms didn't scale beyond one regiment. Either way, we'll know the truth. We'll." He reached the formation, stood before 10,000 pairs of eyes that had forgotten hope. Behind him, inquisitorial banners snapped in the toxic wind. Overhead, gun servitors tracked the prisoners with automated precision, ready to massacre anyone who made a wrong move. Frank pulled out his bolt pistol, fired it into the air. The crack echoed across the landing platform like Judgment Day. "Listen up!" His voice carried without amplification, trained by years of commanding rooms full of people who didn't want to listen. "My name is Interrogator Frank Castle. Some of you might have heard of me. Some of you probably think I'm the lunatic who shot commissars for doing their jobs. You're half right. I shot commissars for being corrupt murderers who executed good soldiers to meet quotas. The jobs they were doing needed shooting." Murmurs rippled through the formation. Confusion, disbelief. A few sparks of something that might have been hope. "You're all here because the Imperium condemned you to death. Desertion, cowardice, insubordination, theft, assault. Maybe you're guilty, maybe you're not. I don't care about your past." Frank holstered his pistol, spread his hands. "Here's what I care about. In 72 hours, we're deploying to Hive World Typhon Secundus. There's a Tyranid splinter fleet dropping on the planet. 4 hive ships, estimated ground forces of 6 million organisms. The local PDF is already being overrun. The Guard regiment sent to reinforce them are requesting emergency evacuation. Command's response? Send in the Penal Legions, throw the condemned at the swarm, and buy time for a proper defense to form." The murmurs turned to groans. Tyranids. The galaxy's perfect predator. The thing that ate worlds and couldn't be negotiated with, couldn't be reasoned with, could only be fought until you or it was dead. A death sentence even for regular Guard units. For Penal Legions, it was extermination with paperwork. Traditional approach, Frank continued, would be to chain you together, march you into the swarm, and let you die buying minutes. Your deaths would be meaningless. Your families, if you have families, would remember you as criminals who got what you deserved. The Imperium would file your deaths under acceptable losses and move on. He let that sink in, watched understanding dawn on faces that had stopped expecting anything except death. "I'm offering something different." Frank's voice dropped, forcing them to lean in to listen. You fight under my command. You follow my orders. You watch your brothers' backs. You can earn redemption, not just survive, not just die slightly better. Actually clear your names. Restore your honor. Give your families something besides shame when they remember you. How? Someone shouted from the formation. A woman, maybe 30, with the burn scars of someone who'd survived a plasma weapon malfunction. How do we clear our names by dying to tyrannids? By not dying. Frank pulled out a tactical display, projected it holographically above the formation. Typhon Secundus. 6 hive cities, tyrannid drop zones, projected swarm vectors. We're not charging the swarm. We're not throwing ourselves at their guns. We're going to do what the Imperium thinks penal legions can't do. We're going to think. We're going to use tactics. We're going to hit the tyrannids where they're weak, avoid them where they're strong, and accomplish objectives that actually matter instead of just dying gloriously. He zoomed the display to show specific targets. The tyrannids need biomass to sustain their swarm. They're consuming Typhon Secundus's population to fuel their advance. 6 hive cities means 6 massive food sources. Command wants us to hold the hive cities. I say we deny the tyrannids their food instead. We evacuate civilians before the swarm arrives. We burn the biomass they'd consume. We turn Typhon Secundus into a resource drain instead of a supply depot. Make the tyrannids starve instead of feed. That's... The scarred woman blinked. That's actually smart. It's also dangerous. We'll be operating behind tyrannid lines, deep in swarm territory, with no reinforcements if things go bad. Most of you will probably die, but those who survive, those who accomplish the mission. Frank smiled. You'll have earned something the Imperium almost never grants, a second chance. Your criminal records expunged, your family benefits restored, your names cleared. You'll die as soldiers, not criminals. Or better yet, you'll live as soldiers, not criminals. Silence fell across the formation. 10,000 condemned prisoners processing the impossible idea that they might be worth more than their deaths. I need volunteers, Frank said. Anyone who wants to take this chance, step forward. Anyone who'd rather face traditional penal legion deployment. Anyone who doesn't believe redemption is possible, stay where you are. I'll have you transferred to other units. No punishment, no judgment. This is your choice. He waited. For 5 seconds, nobody moved. 10,000 prisoners frozen in uncertainty, unable to believe that someone was offering them hope instead of death. Then one soldier stepped forward, a man with the tattoos of a hive ganger, scarred hands that had probably killed before the Imperium made it official. I'll volunteer, not because I believe in redemption, because I'm already dead, and dying for something sounds better than dying for nothing. Another stepped forward, then another, then 10, then 100, then all of them. 10,000 condemned prisoners stepping forward simultaneously, choosing to fight for redemption instead of waiting for execution. Choosing Frank's impossible mission over traditional penal legion annihilation. General Brennus watched from the command platform, his face unreadable. Beside him, Inquisitor Eisenhorn nodded slowly, recording everything. Frank Castle looked at his army of the condemned and wondered if he'd just inspired them to greatness or led them to slaughter. Probably both. In the 41st millennium, those weren't mutually exclusive. Good, Frank said. Then let's get to work. We've got 72 hours to turn 10,000 criminals into soldiers, starting with combat training, tactical briefings, and making damn sure every one of you understands. You're not cannon fodder anymore. You're my soldiers, and I don't waste my soldiers' lives. The deployment to Typhon Secundus was everything Command promised and worse. The tyrannids had already consumed 2 hive cities by the time the 13th Penal Legion made planetfall. The PDF was shattered. Regular guard regiments were falling back to final defensive positions. The swarm was winning. Frank's force deployed away from the main battle, dropping into the industrial sectors between hive cities where the Tyranids were consolidating biomass for processing. His mission, evacuate civilians and deny the swarm its food supply, was impossible by any conventional assessment, which was exactly why it might work. The 13th fought across Typhon Secundus for 6 weeks. They evacuated 300,000 civilians from behind Tyranid lines. They burned biomass reclamation facilities, destroyed digestion pools, sabotaged synapse creature coordination nodes. They fought smarter than the Tyranids expected humans to fight, hit targets the swarm didn't think to defend, and survived through tactical excellence instead of heroic sacrifice. Casualties were brutal. 3,000 dead in the first week, another 2,000 in the second. By week 6, the 13th Penal Legion had been reduced to 4,000 survivors. But those 4,000 had accomplished what 3 regular guard regiments failed to do. They'd forced the Tyranid splinter fleet to withdraw from Typhon Secundus due to insufficient biomass to sustain the invasion. The hive ships left, searching for easier prey, and the planet was saved. Frank stood in the ruins of Hive Tertius, surrounded by his surviving soldiers, and realized something profound. They'd stopped looking like condemned criminals. They looked like veterans, scarred, exhausted, traumatized, but proud. They'd earned their redemption in blood and fire and 6 weeks of impossible warfare. Interrogator Castle. An inquisitorial courier approached, bearing sealed orders. From Inquisitor Eisenhorn. Your performance on Typhon Secundus has been deemed exemplary. The Inquisition is authorizing expansion of your Penal Legion program. You're being assigned 6 more condemned regiments for training and deployment. Additionally, the courier paused, clearly uncomfortable with the next part. You've been granted authority to investigate Inquisitor Lord Karamazov regarding his cross-dimensional extraction programs. Frank's hand tightened on his bolt pistol. Karamazov, the name he'd been searching for. The Inquisitor who'd pulled him from Earth scrambled his brain and turned him into a weapon. Where is he? Segmentum Obscurus, the Calixis sector. He's conducting experiments with warp-touched assets from non-imperial realities. Inquisitor Eisenhorn believes you have grounds for investigation given your personal connection to his work. Personal connection. That was one way to describe being kidnapped across dimensions and mind-wiped. Frank looked at his surviving soldiers. 4,000 condemned men and women who'd proven that redemption was possible, who'd fought from purpose instead of fear, who'd earned their second chances through competence and courage. They were his proof, his evidence, his vindication that the Imperium's brutal system could be changed. And now he had authorization to confront the man who'd made him part of that brutal system. Tell Eisenhorn I'm accepting the assignment, Frank said. The 13th Penal Legion will finish processing here, receive their redemptions and honors, then redeploy to Calixis sector for further operations. We've got an Inquisitor to investigate. The courier saluted and left. Frank stood alone in the ruins, watching his soldiers celebrate their survival, their redemption, their transformation from condemned criminals to honored veterans. They'd proven his theory. Soldiers fought better from trust than terror. Redemption worked better than execution. Even people the Imperium threw away could accomplish the impossible if someone believed in them. Now he just had to prove the same thing applied to himself. Frank Castle, the Punisher from Earth, had been kidnapped, mind-wiped, and weaponized by Inquisitor Lord Karamazov. For 6 months he'd been a monster wearing a Commissar's coat. For 6 more months he'd been hunting the corrupt and reforming the broken. And now he was going to make his creator answer for the crime of creating him. In the grim darkness of the far future, there was only war, but there was also justice. And Frank Castle was about to deliver it to the one man in the galaxy who thought himself above it. Frank Castle stood on the observation deck of the inquisitorial cruiser Righteous Vindication, watching the warp jump countdown tick towards 0. Beside him, the 4,000 survivors of the 13th Penal Legion prepared for whatever came next. No longer criminals, but soldiers who'd earned their redemption in blood. Behind them, 6 more condemned regiments waited in the hold, hoping Frank could work the same miracle for them that he'd worked for the 13th. General Brennus had sent him off with a handshake and a warning. Karamazov isn't like the Commissars you've been hunting. He's an Inquisitor Lord. He has the authority to mind-wipe entire worlds if he thinks it serves the Emperor. Going after him means going after the Inquisition's darkest secrets. You might not survive this one, Frank. Frank had just smiled. I stopped worrying about survival the day I woke up in this nightmare galaxy. Now I just worry about making the guilty pay before I go down. The data slate in his hand contained everything Eisenhorn had provided on Karamazov's cross-dimensional extraction program. Hundreds of subjects pulled from alternate realities. Most didn't survive the transition. Their minds shattered by exposure to the warp, their bodies consumed by demonic possession, their souls devoured by horrors that existed between dimensions. The few who survived were mind-wiped, reprogrammed, and deployed as weapons against threats the Inquisition couldn't officially acknowledge. Frank had been one of the lucky ones. He'd survived, adapted, eventually remembered who he was. But the others, the ones who'd died screaming in Karamazov's laboratories, the ones who'd been turned into servitors when their minds broke, the ones who'd been executed when they proved unsuitable for Imperial service. They deserved justice too, and Frank was going to deliver it. The warp jump completed. Through the viewport, the Calixis sector materialized in all its gothic horror, a region of space where the Emperor's light burned dim and shadows held secrets that could damn worlds. Somewhere in that darkness, Inquisitor Lord Karamazov conducted his experiments, convinced that his work served the Imperium even as it consumed innocent lives from realities that had nothing to do with humanity's war against chaos. "Sir," one of his soldiers approached, a former deserter named Markev, who'd become the 13th's de facto sergeant. "The men are ready. Whatever you need, wherever you're going, we're with you." Frank looked at the 4,000 faces watching him, condemned criminals he'd transformed into soldiers, broken people he'd given purpose, the living proof that the Imperium's brutal system could be reformed, that redemption was possible, that even the damned could be saved. They'd followed him into a tyrannid swarm and survived. Now they were offering to follow him into something potentially worse, an investigation that could destroy the Inquisition from within. "I appreciate that," Frank said quietly. "But this fight isn't yours. You've earned your redemption. You've cleared your names. You can request transfer to regular guard units, serve with honor, live as soldiers instead of condemned criminals. You don't owe me anything more." Markev smiled. "With respect, sir, you're wrong. We owe you everything. You gave us back our humanity when the Imperium took it away. You proved we were worth more than our deaths. The least we can do is stand with you when you face the bastard who tried to take your humanity away." The other soldiers nodded. 4,000 voices raised in agreement. 4,000 condemned souls choosing to stand against an Inquisitor Lord because the man who'd saved them needed saving in return. Frank felt something crack in his chest. Not pain, something else. Something he hadn't felt since Maria and the kids died in Central Park. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. "All right," he said finally. "Then let's go remind Inquisitor Lord Karamazov that even in the 41st millennium, even in the Imperium's darkest corners, there are still people willing to fight for justice. That authority doesn't mean immunity. That power doesn't excuse cruelty." He holstered his bolt pistol, the same weapon he'd used to execute corrupt commissars, to save innocent soldiers, to fight his way through a galaxy that rewarded brutality and punished mercy. It had become an extension of his purpose, a tool for delivering consequences to people who thought themselves above them. "Let's go hunting," Frank Castle said. The righteous vindication burned toward the Calixis sector, carrying the Punisher and his army of the redeemed toward a confrontation that would determine whether the Imperium could truly reform, or whether it would consume its would-be saviors like it consumed everything else. They gave him a badge. They gave him a gun. They told him to kill the guilty. On Earth, Frank Castle had killed criminals who broke the law. In the 41st millennium, he'd killed soldiers who followed it. He'd been turned into the very system he'd always fought against, mind-wiped and weaponized by an inquisition that saw him as just another tool for maintaining their brutal order. But Frank Castle remembered. He remembered who he'd been, who he'd killed, who he'd failed to save, and he remembered why the Punisher existed, not to serve systems, but to punish those who abused them. The Commissariat had learned that lesson. Kreutz and his corrupt colleagues had paid for their crimes. Soldiers across an entire sector now fought from trust instead of terror, from loyalty instead of fear, proving that the Imperium's brutal doctrine wasn't the only path to military effectiveness. Now Inquisitor Lord Karamazov would learn the same lesson, that cross-dimensional kidnapping was still kidnapping, that mind-wiping was still torture, that experimenting on unwilling subjects was still murder, even if those subjects came from realities the Imperium didn't recognize. The guilty would be punished. Justice would be served. And if Frank Castle died delivering it, at least he'd die as himself. Not as the mind-wiped weapon they'd tried to make him, but as the man who'd spent 2 lifetimes making monsters answer for their crimes. In the grim darkness of the far future, there was only war. But there was also Frank Castle, and that meant the guilty should be very, very afraid.